Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 9 of the Case King Pro Series, where our drivers are going to be tackling 90 minutes of action around the legendary Spa Francorchamps for tonight's race. And what a season it has been so far in the Pro Series, and we have come off the back of a very special couple of races where Luke Whitehead back-to-back victories in his home country races, Brands Hatch and Donington Park going the way of your championship leader. And Donington Park was such a fantastic race that we had last week. Absolutely the most difficult weather conditions we have ever seen our Pro Series drivers have to contend with. Completely flooded track and pushing all of our drivers to their absolute limits. And despite the fact that Marco Bischoff took a fantastic pole position and was able to sustain the pressure on Luke Whitehead throughout the entire race, the British driver did not crack and he performed brilliantly in that one, and as a result finds himself in a very comfortable position right now in terms of the championship standings, leading the way both when we consider the total accumulation of races that we have had so far, as well as also in terms of drop scores. And when factoring in those drop scores, he has over 800 points clear of a gap over the likes of George Boothby, and then a further 600 points down to Grantus Korekis. Now, of course, when we get to a little bit further on in this championship, so by the time we hit around round 10 in the season, those drivers that have attended every single race so far this season will start to see their scores dropping from previous rounds, maybe haven't gone so well if they improve in the final 2 rounds of this championship. And then those that maybe have had some issues, the likes of Jade Hutchinson, Jardier as well, where they've had some DNS or some really difficult finishes, Marco Bischoff another one in that as well, may be able to bounce back a little bit in the closing stages of this championship. But right now, the man to beat that has been in extremely fine form this season on his debut in the Pro Series, no less as well, Luke Whitehead, has been formidable. But around here at Spa tonight, is that Porsche going to be the one at the front of field? He is incredibly quick. We have so many fantastic Porsche drivers in this field, no doubt, but it is clear that the likes of the Hondas, the Ferraris, and maybe even some of the other drivers that we've got in this top split field for this evening, in the McLarens as well, are just likely to be the overall stronger package around this circuit. Because despite the fact that Porsche is an absolute weapon in the middle sector, it loses out so much up through the Kemmel Straight, the climb through Eau Rouge and Radion before we get to that section as well, and then all the way out of Stavelot down to the bus stop chicane. It just doesn't quite have the grunt to keep up with some of those other cars. And we have seen Whitehead and some of the other drivers take unconventional approaches to trying to get extra straight line speed out of that car. We saw that clear as day at Paul Ricard, where Luke Whitehead was clearly running a lower downforce setup than he probably conventionally would around a circuit like Paul Ricard, just for the Porsche in general, but was really able to make it work and was very much in contention for a potential race victory earlier on in the season, up until it went wrong in the closing stages of that one. So we'll have to see whether or not the British driver or any of our other Porsche drivers tonight end up taking that sort of approach, and if they can take the fight that bit more to the likes of the Hondas in the hands of George Boothby, Valentine Barry, the Ferrari of Jade Hutchinson has been so consistent throughout the season as well, likely very much to be up there. So whilst we are waiting for the server to get underway, let's have a little bit of a closer look at this incredible 20-turn circuit here at Spa. It is a fantastic one indeed. Over 7 kilometers of legendary racing goodness. Down into La Source, you go and then wind your way up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Such a tricky section around this circuit, and you are pushing on the limit time and time again. You need confidence in the car for it to stick through there. You've got to be careful with track limits as well around this circuit. Into Lacon, first big overtaking opportunity with that long slipstream towards that section, and then into Sector 2, where that Porsche is going to be so strong with the tighter, windy parts of the circuit. On the power through Pouhon, and then surging away back down the hill, down towards turn 12 and 13. through Campus and Stavlo, then you begin that climb all the way back up the hill and on the run up in towards Blanchimont. Such a fast corner. A very easy one for the most part, both in race and qualifying conditions, but we do have the possibility of some changeable conditions for tonight's racing. And if we do have rain, expect a couple of things. One, expect the Porsche to maybe be that little bit more competitive. It can make use of its acceleration, its braking capabilities, and cornering as well, though it is going to be tricky, particularly through Pawn. That lift-off oversteer is very difficult sometimes to master, so there could be some potential issues with getting the balance right with that car as the fuel comes out during this 90-minute race. But also the likes of the Ferraris, even the Aston Martins, we've got a couple of those in the field as well this evening. If we do have changeable conditions, those cars tend to be very effective at transitioning between one stage to another. When you need confidence around here to really extract everything that you can from the car around the circuit, it is oh so important for you to be able to maximize both dry and wet conditions. So it'll be really interesting to see whether or not Spa ends up throwing us that sort of challenge, and also a challenge for the drivers. I imagine any rain that we have this evening is probably going to seem fairly low in comparison to what we saw for our drivers at Donington Park, where that was just the most dreadful of conditions with flooding. And even when it transitioned into the heavy rain, the surface water difference between flooded and heavy rain conditions is very substantial, and it's so difficult with aquaplaning around there. But Luke Whitehead, of course, the absolute master in those rainy conditions, to take a second victory of the season. And if he manages to make it 3 in a row this evening, not only will he have done an absolutely incredible job at maximizing the results from his car, but I think I'm fairly confident in saying this, I do believe that he would be the first driver to ever take 3 Pro Series wins in a row. He's taken 2, and joining the likes of Marco Bischoff, who I think may have only actually been the only other driver to do it alongside Jardier when those two were battling in Season 7. And if Luke Whitehead manages to pull that off in the closing stages of this season, that could be an incredibly pivotal part of the championship. So it'll be really interesting to see how they get on this evening. Server has opened up, and we will be making our way across in towards qualifying in just a moment. And then we can have a look at how each of our drivers are going to be getting on for this evening's action. So I shall get the final bits and pieces sorted on the overlay, and then we can see how these drivers spend their final moments before qualifying, trying to dial in their setups, trying to dial in any final details they can of tyre pressures, brake ducts, and things like that that can make so much of a difference. When we've seen such small margins in the Pro Series time and time again between these fantastic drivers, those tiny differences really do make all the difference. I think we can now have a look over into the practice session, and interestingly enough, when we look at what we are working with at the moment as our drivers head out on circuit for the first time, we do have dry conditions, but we have a couple of other things to look at. Look at that rain, 30 minutes time. Now, of course, this practice session is going to move over to qualifying, but based on the weather simulation within ACC, that could very much mean that we have a wet qualifying session, maybe even a wet race as well. And if we have some changeable conditions around here tonight for 90 minutes at Spa, you are guaranteed to have a very exciting bit of racing for our drivers to contend with. Always putting on a fantastic show for us here in the Pro Series. The best drivers on the LFM platform, all competing in one of the most demanding and tricky championships there is around. Of course, remember, big prizes on the line for this championship as well, where both first, second, and third place will be walking away with some very nice prizes brought to you by Case King in this championship. So a lot on the line for these drivers. We'll go on board with Alex Kopsov in a minute to give us a rundown of an onboard of this incredible circuit, and the number 18 car using that Honda, where it's going to be areas like this on the climb up towards Blanchimont and out of La Source where this car is so powerful. So let's have a little look at what it's like to do a lap around here at Spa Francorchamps in the Honda NSX, then winding yourself up through the bus stop chicane, trying to get the best exit you possibly can when going for one lap pace. You'll see a lot of drivers taking a really wide line to enter the beginning of the lap and then try and spot your braking point into La Source. Tricky as that inside right tyre starts to unload on the apex and then dip it into the camber on the power as early as you dare, and you don't want to go too wide because that sausage curb on the exit very likely to destabilize the car. Now beginning the climb up towards Eau Rouge, and clip that first apex. See a variety of lines through here for each of the different cars. Kick of oversteer for the number 18 cars. He tries to keep the Honda planted through there, and you need confidence and consistency if you're going to be at the pointy end of this field for tonight's race. And going to be so tricky with track limits as well through that section. Hard on the brakes as you enter Lake Con for the first time there. Clipping each of these curbs, you can see that he takes those chunks. Some cars will deal with these better than others. Ferrari maybe will be a little bit more cautious when we see them making their way through a section, but can really pull the car through each apex. Now trying to go in towards Bruxelles. Variety of lines through here. Kopsov taking very tight line through turn 10 there. You sometimes see other drivers taking a bit of a double apex approach, very much like Luffield at Silverstone. On the powered, on the exit of a no-name corner then, and then heading towards one of the trickiest corners of this circuit at Pool 1, clipping that first apex, running out as wide as you can on the power, and you want that nose tucked in so that then you don't run too wide on the exit there. And the Porsche with that lift-off oversteer can sometimes be a bit tricky on the entry, but once you're on the power, it tends to stay pretty well put. Then winding away through turn 13 and 14, then trying to be patient on the throttle, back to the left-hand side before going in towards Stavelot on the power as early as you can, because then you carry all that momentum through turn 16, easy flat in these dry conditions and on low fuel. But when we make our way into the race, sometimes in certain cars, maybe like Mercedes, a little bit more understeery, not always easy to get the front end to bite as you come off that curb and through turn 16, flat out through Blanchimont there, and on the run down towards the bus stop chicane. Very tricky at the end of this lap to try to spot your braking point, taking a very wide line on the entry. Missed the two sausage curbs on the apex, hooking up on the power, and for Kopsov then, as he makes his way towards the line, it is going to be as I've just lost him on my leaderboard, unfortunately, 217.9 for the number 18 car, just behind Gary Huang in the number 17 Ferrari on 217.8. Of course, this is not qualifying, so these positions are a little bit of an unknown quantity, but they do give us a bit of an indication of maybe which drivers are feeling more comfortable with their cars and setup. Of course, there's two different approaches that you can use this final run up to qualify. You can either test the car out just for a final time in race trim, try to dial in that confidence in the car, because of course 90 minutes, especially longer race distance, that is where the majority of the time and everything is going to be gained. Track position is important, but you can overtake around here, so long-term pace is really going to outweigh the benefit of track position. So that can be a rather pivotal factor, and some drivers may be wanting to go down that route. On the flip side, though, you can look to try to maximize your feel for the car heading in towards qualifying, get yourself track position, and with the sorts of incidents that we can have here at Spa, particularly in the early laps of the race when you have such a busy grid. I think we have roughly 40 cars in the server for this evening. If you qualify a bit further up in the field, maybe manage to stay out of that mid-pack chaos, it can pay dividends in the end and save you a lot of trouble and headache in the race. So definitely a balance between the two, and in this 15-minute qualifying session, like I say, it is difficult with track limits. It's so easy to not only have an issue around the lap with how demanding Spa is as a circuit, real driver's track around here, but also in terms of just pushing the limits a little bit too hard, sometimes on the exit of Pouhon, on the exit turn 9 as well, out of Les Combes. No Name is another tricky one, and of course Eau Rouge and Radion, very regularly a section where track limit warnings can kick in, and if you do get a drive-through penalty from that in the race, it is practically game over, because Spa, one of, and I think the longest pit lane that we have here on ACC, and will very easily drop you almost down an entire lap on the field if you serve a drive-through penalty. So these drivers will be looking to obviously try to avoid that. Gary Huang, still the fastest driver on the circuit so far, with just about a minute and 15 left to go in this practice session. 2 minutes 17.6 for the Chinese driver at the moment. Next nearest is that Honda of Kopsov, and then the next one of the Ferraris is Samir Fock, who was purple on the first sector, the only sector that the number 17 car at the top of the leaderboard at the moment wasn't fastest in. So Samir may be running a setup that was a little bit more comfortable and stable through Eau Rouge and Radion, because you do lose a surprisingly large amount of momentum when you see the steering wheel really flicking from left to right as drivers try to scrabble to keep that car planted. It does scrub off a significant amount of speed, and you carry that all the way up the Kemmel Straight towards Les Combes, so big factor. And also the exit out of La Source, of course, very crucial to try to square up the exit out of there nicely. Big improvement for Samir on this lap. I think this could see him firmly go into the 17s, and it does on a 2:17.4, and that will be the last effort from him in this session, and then 2 purple sectors for him in 1 and 2. So Ferrari's right now at the pointier end of the grid, going in towards practice end. But that rain ever looming, and we'll have to see if that translates over by the time we get in towards qualifying. Steinbrenner in the BMW just heading off into the pits. Wise to practice the pit entry from time to time as well, because it is definitely a tricky one. And also, just like a drive-through, if you speed in the pits and get a stop-and-go 30-second penalty, well, that's even more detrimental to your race, and certainly something that these guys will be wanting to avoid. Quite a few Ferraris in the server tonight as well. Number 33, or Tichanos, the Frenchman, just making his way towards the line, quite wide on the exit of the bus stop chicane there, but still will be an improvement and good enough for the top 5. But quite the spread of lap times there so far in that warm-up session, so it'll be really interesting to see what they do in qualifying, which we'll be moving over to very shortly. And also whether or not we are going to have any rain this evening. I get the impression that we very likely could have some on the way, at least for qualifying. And if we do have that changing series of conditions, expect there to be some alternative forms of strategy. We saw the way it played out at Paul Ricard, where Jardier took his one and only victory of the season so far, where he went for the wet tyres and stayed out on those, even on the drying track. And then you had the likes of Robin Schwanker, Luke Whitehead, that stayed out later on in the race and decided to then move onto the slick tyres when they were ready, and they were absolutely rapid in the final stages, but the damage had already been done, the gaps had already been made, and Jardier ended up making the right call over on that one. Of course, these drivers in the Pro Series, they do have a pit window to abide by in the central portion of this race, but it looks like, at least for qualifying, our drivers are going to be free from any sort of rainy conditions, and I'm sure that there will be a few sighs of relief amongst the grid for that. So at least for qualifying, it will be a dry session. Whether or not, though, we have any surprises in the race, we shall have to wait and see as they all head out on circuit for the first time. And Kopsov will lead the drivers away for their opening series of laps, and it's crucial to get out on circuit pretty swiftly here at Spa, because of course it is a very long lap. We don't have too many tracks on the calendar and with ACC that allows our drivers to, you know, really get those laps done quickly and get everything sorted in such a short space of time. And with such a long lap here at Spa, when it does, when you make those mistakes and you have to reset back to the pits, it does cost you quite significantly when you end up losing that time in the qualifying session. So it'll be very interesting to see how our drivers get on with all of this. And I have just been notified about a livery tool, which I have had launched, but it does seem to have... I don't seem to be picking up on a great deal of livery, so I've just tried to reset that. I may have to pop in and out of the server between qualifying and the race, and hopefully we might be able to get the liveries for each of these drivers when we then make our way across into the race session. There's been a bit of a change of a couple of cars making their way through, as there is now the Porsche. Can't quite see who that is in the hands of in qualifying at the moment, that will be leading the drivers away for the first time. You see the Honda already gaining, though, towards Blanchimont. I don't think Kopsov will be swapping positions and will look to open up the gap. If anything, might be able to get quite a nice slipstream off the Porsche of that car in front. And then we'll see how it all plays out. Let's try to go on board with the man that has been absolutely on fire in the last couple of races. Luke Whitehead, your championship leader. He's making his way up towards Blanchimont right now. And I think he's only had one pole position to his name so far, but has constantly been very good at extracting pace out of this Porsche, even around circuits where maybe it wasn't the strongest car overall. But has just been in such fine form as of late, and has also been making his way through the rankings very nicely in the LFM rating system. I think now the third highest rated driver in the server, and has done it in a very short space of time as well. So we're getting an interesting contrast between what we had on board with the Honda of Kopsov earlier on and this Porsche. Of course, it's going to be a similar story up through the straight sections, but with a little bit of that detriment in terms of the top end performance of this Porsche. But a lot of commitment and a lot of time will be gained, no shadow of a doubt, when he heads through that middle sector out of La Source. Maybe not quite the tidiest of lines through there. Looks a little bit cautious on the power. And in the Porsche, it is even more crucial to make sure that you get a good run out of that part of the circuit. Heading through Eau Rouge and rounding on for the first time. Pretty nice for the Porsche through there. A lot of downforce on board this car. And of course, just if nothing else, it approaches that part of the circuit that little bit slower relative to other cars, so it makes it easier to make your way through those sections of the lap. And then this is where the Porsche really starts to come alive, and we'll start to see Whitehead really playing around with the wheel in that car as he makes his way through Lécon, taking all that runoff that you can get away with on the exit, and now on the run down towards Bruxelles. You can see takes a little bit of that wider approach in the mid corner. The agility of the Porsche able to make that work, and it opens up the line heading towards 11, and you can get a much wider entry as you head through No Name then. And let's see how much oversteer does the car have on the run in towards Poul. Tucks the steering wheel in there, very composed actually on the apex of that corner. You do sometimes, if a transition between brake and throttle isn't as quick and clinical as we see for Whitehead, can get a little bit skatey, as we actually had there on the run in towards turn 13. So on the power once more now, running towards Stavelot. And this is where the joy of the Porsche will end, although still twitchy near the latter portions of the lap there. And for Whitehead, as he looks to round out the lap, Correcas to set the benchmark at the front of the field. Of course, Veloce Esports teammate to Luke Whitehead here, and has done a 2:17.3. Hutchinson in the Ferrari, now making his way towards the 16s. I'm not sure Luke Whitehead is going to be quite able to topple that lap of the Ferrari. It's definitely been a pretty handy lap. We would think nothing less of the championship leader, but I don't think it's been the tidiest of performances, and yet only good enough right now for P6, and a second down on Hutchinson there, so you can see how much time he has lost overall in this part of qualifying. In actual fact, it's Kopsov at the moment in the Honda that's going very quick. Once again, he was fastest in Sector 1 and Sector 3, and that's obviously the strongest part of the lap for the Hondas here at Spa. And it's all going to be about then trying to maintain that performance in that car through this middle sector. He's improving by quite a chunk at the moment, 3/10 up. He goes in towards turn 13 there, and that right now would be good enough to topple that lap time of Hutchinson. In actual fact, going briefly purple, so's Hutchinson though, at the pointier end of the timing sheets. We haven't seen Hutchinson in a pole position yet so far this season, but he has been so consistent. He's only had a couple of races that have gone a little bit wonky for the Canadian driver. Was at one point in the season, the earlier stages, championship leader Valentin Barrett. A big lap time from the Frenchman, first man into the 16s, and does it convincingly for the number 8 Honda driver, race winner at Watkins Glen earlier on this season, and he's completely demolished the efforts of anyone else in the field for the time being, because Kopsov, as he makes his way towards the line, is going to be an improvement. May scrape into the 16s, doesn't quite manage to topple the Frenchman though. The 2:16.9 from him. What is it going to be for Hutchinson, the Canadian driver, as he rounds out his lap in that number 6 Ferrari, heading towards the bus stop chicane now, and trying to see if he can keep it neat and tidy. Sometimes tricky to get this car to behave well on the power. We saw a lot of Ferrari drivers struggling at Donington Park, coming out to some of the slower speed corners, but composed from Hutchinson. Gained a lot in the middle sector. That's where the Ferrari is very strong. Extremely good downforce package on board the Ferrari there. Gary Huang splits the pair of them 5/1000ths of a second faster than Hutchinson. So it's now Honda, Ferrari, Ferrari, and then Honda again in the top 5 of the leaderboard at the moment. But fantastic effort there from the Chinese driver, George Boothby, though not to be outdone. A 2:16.1. He was rapid around here on Saturday when we had the Next Level Racing Cup. So obviously feeling pretty happy and composed around the circuit at the moment. But what a fantastic lap there from one of the winningest drivers in the Pro Series. Valentin, 4/10 of a second up in that number 8 Honda, and after such a strong start to the season, it's been a little bit of a tricky few races for the Frenchman. Maybe not quite going the way that he would have liked in recent races, but does seem to have a bit more in the tank for today, at least based on this qualifying session so far. 2/10 up the improvement on the run in towards the bus stop chicane there. Trying to spot his braking point, clip one apex, clip the other, trying to get the power down nicely as he heads out of turn 20 then and towards the line. Good exit for the number 8 car. It won't be good enough to topple his recently acquired teammate, Valentin, joining the Yassi roster. Obviously George Boothby in the Veloce team sister partnership to Veloce. As Samir just rounding out his lap. He's pretty even though with his previous lap time. Tell you what, someone that is on a big improvement just up in front of him though is Steinbrenner in the BMW. See what the German driver can do in the number 14 car, and he heads towards the timing beam, and it's good enough for P7. Fantastic effort there from Steinbrenner to improve. Samir did manage to find a chunk of time in the final part of the lap there. Number 5 car going up into P3. So definitely right now the Hondas and the Ferraris being the fastest cars on the circuit at the moment. We've got the likes of Marco Bischoff currently down in P9, trying to keep that Porsche inside of the top 10. Same goes for the likes of Korekis. Who else have we got improving further down the field? We've got the likes of Antonov. He's found a couple of tenths in the opening part of the lap. Noah Reeder is a couple of tenths up all the way up towards the Lake on there. So still time for the German driver to improve as well. We've got Walsingham in the Mercedes bit further up. He's making his way towards Poole. Now tricky corner for that Mercedes, particularly in a race trim. Will tend to bite the apex quite nicely in qualifying, but that car does burn through its front tyres, and it does make it very tricky sometimes to get consistent long-term performance out of this car. And Spa, 90 minutes of racing, long stints for this one for these drivers to try to contend with. So Walsingham may put himself in a pretty handy position in terms of qualifying, but may struggle to maintain that in the race. But has obviously been very quick in this car so far this season for the British driver. Number 11 car roaring along in that Mercedes V8 under the bonnet as he makes his way through Blanchimont now. And now trying to spot his braking point. Moves his way to the left-hand side of the circuit, braking as late as he dares, and then clipping the first apex. Lack of agility in this car to some extent, but gets it pretty nice and neat on the exit. The big improvement over his previous best. And for Walsingham then, it's good enough for P13. In actual fact, purple in the middle sector. That is extremely impressive for Walsingham in the Mercedes. So maybe is keeping a lot of downforce on board that car. Can be a little bit of a sketchy one through Eau Rouge and Radion, so maybe that explains the performance in the middle sector, but fantastic stuff there from the number 11 car. A few drivers making their way into the pits to get their final adjustments done. Sean Tempest, half a second up on his previous lap time for the number 15 car, makes his way in towards the top 20 then. Lav Russian has also making some time up through Les Combes, 2/10 up for the number 26 Honda. We've also got Marvin Vessel further down, another one of the Mercedes drivers, almost a second up on his previous lap time. So is Samuel Ratt, so we will try to check on his lap time in just a moment. The German driver, though, in the Mercedes, good enough for 24th position. Samuel Ratt's a lot of time as well left to go in the Ferrari as he makes his way through Stavolo in towards 16 then. In that number 30 car, 1.2 seconds the improvement. We haven't really had a representative lap from the German driver just yet in this session. So this will be the first benchmark that we see for this number 30 car. A lot of experience in the cockpit of that Ferrari, trying to spot his braking point in towards that final chicane. Maybe not going quite as wide on the entry as we've seen certain drivers, not as tucked into the apex as he might have liked to have been. Big improvement though, 1.7 seconds, 1.8 seconds for Samuel Ratt, and good enough for 28th position by the end of all of that. So as we head in towards the closing stages of qualifier now, George Boothby has just started what I think may be, oh, it's going to be very close as he's not too far into the lap just yet, but there's barely enough time left in the session to get round for another lap. So I have to see whether he can squeeze one more in. Currently pretty even with his previous lap time. We've got Tansvin Zahaka in the Audi number 28 car, currently sitting in at P10. So that's a fantastic effort so far from the British driver. Remember, the numbers on these cars correspond to their relative ELO within the LFM rating system. So when you see a number plate on the car that is much higher than the position that they are currently in, that is a fantastic indication that that driver is performing above and beyond for what would be expected for them. Valentin Barrier also going purple further up, has managed to significantly close the gap towards George Boothby, 216.3 from the number 8 Honda there, but still a couple of tenths adrift of the British driver, who is trying to find small amounts of improvements as Tansvin Zahaka gets a little bit of a compromise line through the bus stop chicane. There's going to run it towards the line though, still an improvement for the British driver. Good enough for P7. Great stuff there from him. What about Grantis Correcas? He's found 4/10 on his lap. And George Boothby, yellow flag, so no further improvement for George Boothby then. But I tell you what, Valentin Barrier still up on his lap, and this will be his final 10th. So he has got a bit left in the tank, and one more opportunity to try to make something happen, and he very much could be challenging for pole position here because he is going very quickly and could maybe even break his way in towards the 15s, excuse me. Hutchinson, no further improvements from him, currently sitting in P3. Correcas 4/10 up for him. He'll certainly get into the 16s, but it's only good enough for P6, but great effort still in the Porsche. But right now, Valentin Barrier on an absolute charge. The Frenchman, one-time race winner here in the Pro Series. I think maybe only one or two other podiums that this man has achieved, but right now he is trying to go for glory and put himself in the hot seat for what could be a very special day for the Frenchman if he was able to get a pole position and convert that into a second victory. And with 3/10 up as he makes his way towards Blanchimont for the final time, it's looking good for Valentin. He's got one real corner left to go. And even better, 4 tenths up, so he's carried a great deal of momentum up from the bottom of the hill in towards the final braking zone. He goes, and he doesn't need to send it too much in towards this final apex. How does he fare? It looks pretty neat and tidy. In actual fact, he's still finding time. A little bit wide on the 5 exit, but it's going to be a monstrous time for the number 8 car. And Valentine Barrier heads towards pole position, and I don't think there is anyone else on the circuit right now that can challenge for that. Gary Huang up by a 10th. Kopsov up by a 10th as well, and they may be able to challenge for those top 5 positions. Samir, 4 tenths up to 16.3, potentially on the line here. Towards the top 5 he goes, and loses a little bit at the end there to 16.5. Korekas has backed out of his lap, so a mistake there from a Lithuanian, and isn't going to improve any further. 6 tenths up for Brugnar as he makes his way out of the final turn there. Another one of the Ferraris maybe trying to make his way in towards the top 10 there for the number 21 car. Good enough for P11. Small improvement as well for Tansvidza Hacker right at the end to go in towards P8 there. Henrik Gamble has found 3 tenths. Gary Huang just rounding out his lap in all of that as well. See what the number 17 Ferrari can do. 3 tenths up is a much smarter bus stop chicane for the Ferrari. Good enough for P3, second row of the grid. Great effort there from the Chinese driver. Henrik Gamble, one of the last drivers on circuit. I think the only one left that may be in a position to improve in this session. So let's see what the number 20 car can do for K Kramer Racing Esports. And he is going to improve up to P12. And a good effort there from the number 20 car. Stuben Rauch is just about up on his lap time, but I think in the end he won't improve in all of that. But great effort there from him. And what a lap from Valentine Barrier to put that one together. That was absolutely exceptional in all of that. Now, I am going to have a little bit of an unconventional moment in this, because I'm desperately going to try to restart things and see if we can get the liveries to be working. So it will be a slightly longer transition than normal, but hopefully, if all goes well, we will be able to rejoin and everything will be as it should be. So I shall look to get all of that set up. But Valentine Barrier, what a last effort there. George Boothby, he timed it, I think, just a little bit off at the end to try to get in those extra couple of laps, but wasn't quite able to get all of that done in the closing stages of qualifying. But still, front row start, a lot can happen in this race, and of course, 90 minutes for it to all play out as well. So definitely do not rule out that man from the race whatsoever, as he could still very much be a contender for this one. He has certainly taken victories from further down the order before, and I have no doubt will be challenging Valentine once again as he looks trying to go for his second victory of the season. And just looking to trying to make our way in towards the server now, and hopefully, if all is well, we will have the complete set of liveries for our drivers in this field. And I've got a bit of an interesting scenario here. Hopefully, if things all play out in the way that I'm hoping it to, that we can look to reconnect nicely. Like I say, I do apologise for this, everybody, but hopefully in due course we'll be able to make our way. And I think we now have got liveries. So certain drivers, there are still some black cars on the grid. I think those are drivers that are running a custom livery, but are not have not submitted it to the LFM platform. Of course, the liveries that you will see in the server are going to be the ones that are for Patreon members and have been uploaded to the system. But we will run through the grid in just a second and get a bit of a rundown of how our drivers have fared in that fantastic qualifying session. So Valentine Barrier, the first time he takes pole position here in the Pro Series with a stellar effort from the Frenchman. And then on the front row joining him, George Boothby, who will be looking to try and make use of that slipstream down in towards the Lecom section. on that first run on the beginning of this race and try to see if he can snatch the lead early on. Gary Huang, great effort from him in his debut in the top splits, get P3 with Hutchinson and Samuel Fock in the next two Ferraris, finishing the top 5. And then it is Marco Bischoff, who has had a brilliant qualifying in that. Of course, has done some stellar performances in that Porsche in a very regular fashion in the past, so we know how good he is over one lap. And then Kopsov will start in P7 with Tanzin Zahaka, the first of our Audis. I think he'll be pretty chuffed with that one for the number 28 car. Grantas Korekas in P9. And then rounding out the top 10 is Niels Steinbrenner in the number 14 car. So great effort there from the German driver, the first of our BMWs. And then it is Mattia Brugnara, the Italian driver, starting in 11th place with Henrik Gamble, the next of the K. Kramer Racing Esports team cars, starting in P12 with Manos Gerardis, the Greek driver in the BMW for TF Racing, starting in 13th place. Then we have Robin Schaefer in the BMW, another one of the LFM liveried cars that we now can see starting in 14th place. And Luke Whitehead, disappointing session for the championship leader. Of course, maybe one that will factor into drop scores in the long term, but not what he would have been looking for if he wants to make it 3 wins in a row. Antonov then starts in P16 with Matis Lateo starting in 17th place. And then it is Noah Eder, the next and final of the K. Kramer Racing Esports cars, starting in P18 with Walsingham in 19th place in the Mercedes. So great effort there from the Visceral Esports driver, with Sasha Vassner rounding out the top 20 in another one of the Porsches. We then have Max Lavrushin in the number 26 Honda there, starting in 21st position, and Sean Tempest, number 15 car, starting in 22nd place. Then it will be Samuel Ratt, who I think maybe also making his debut in the top split for the Pro Series, starting in 23rd position, ahead of Benny Vitter in the number 37 car, with the Mercedes of Marvin Vessel starting in 25th place, just behind. We then have Philip Gross, I think possibly the lone McLaren in the server tonight. That could be a car, though, that is pretty pacey in a straight line, with Rui Nunes, the Portuguese driver, starting in 27th place, and then Nico Peninen, the number 29 car, starting in 28th position, with Philip Gamay starting in 29th place. And then rounding out the top 30 will be Justin Stubenrauch. And then we have Jan Drexler in the number 23 car, followed up by Krzysztof Makowski in the number 22 BMW. I do just need to briefly check for a moment. I know it's an unconventional situation, but of course we did start this a bit later on. But we still have plenty of time, so that is all okay. Just making sure we weren't going to miss the race starts. Chichinos starting in 33rd position, with Komisayuk starting in 34th place, with Dom Healy in the number 24 Aston Martin starting in 35th, with Jan Yog starting in 36th position in the number 27 Porsche, and then Oliver Ferrez in the number 25 Ferrari starting in 37th place, with Kirill Mazaspin in the 38th position. And then rounding out the grid is Kevin Rowlands in the Aston Martin. So that is your lineup for today's action then. Apologies for the slightly unconventional build-up for that one then. Obviously a little bit of a unusual start to this one, as I tried to get everything sorted in the closing moments before we get underway for 90 minutes of action here. And looking at the weather, it certainly is looking like, at least for the opening 30 minutes of this race, so there won't be any form of rain for our drivers to contend with. So I imagine that will be a bit of a relief to certain drivers, and if it does end up making its way to the server later on in the session, then perhaps it will end up in a bit more of a convenient point in that pit stop window. Of course, one mandatory pit stop. Drivers don't need to change tyres, but there is a minimum pit stop time of 25 seconds, and 30-second pit stop for changing tyres and around Spa, especially in a 90-minute race. Very likely that is going to be the strategy that most drivers follow, to change the tyres, because of course there will be a much longer run benefit for all of that then. But Valentin Barrier, the first time that he has seen no one in front of him in a Pro Series race, and as they make their way towards La Sourcen, the first run as the lights go green will be towards Eau Rouge. So the Honda driver, we're making his final preparations, making sure everything is set up and okay. Drivers, chances are around here at Spa, maybe running a bit of a more lean engine map on his formation lap, because it is so long, so wanting to make sure that is all ready to go. But for 90 minutes of action there here at Spa Francorchamps for round 9 of the Pro Series, is going to be Valentin Barrier that is going to be leading towards Eau Rouge for the first time. Will he get a second race victory of the season, or will George Boothby snatch it immediately on the run up towards Eau Rouge, and side by side between the two Hondas at the front of the field, Valentin with the inside line, but it goes back towards Boothby as they all sign their way through, rallying on for the first time, and Marco Bischoff already being eaten up in the background. George Boothby trying to out-drag Valentin on the run down towards Lake Holm, and it's 4 wide in the background as well. This is mayhem on the run, and it's almost a dual drag race. George Boothby, though, has managed to get in front. Will he lead in towards Lake Holm? And he does. The British man then leads ahead of Valentin Barrier, 3 wide as they go through Lake Holm for the first time. Yellow flags for the number 16 car further down the order, and it's complete chaos as they head towards Bruxelles for the first time. But George Boothby, dream start for him, repeating what he did on Saturday. Granted Correcas up into P6, Marco Bischoff down towards P9 there, being eaten up as well by Steinbrenner. Henry Gamble trying to go around the outside, now the inside in towards No Name there, with Kotsov being hung out to drive. So is the Italian of Brugnara, and it's almost 3 wide again on the run in towards Bouillon then. Side by side stuff, Luke Whitehead amongst all of this, trying to make up positions from his poor qualifying, and he's made 3 up in towards P12 then, with Brugnara losing out another one on the exit there, and coming under pressure immediately. Gerardis, oh, is that a mistake there from Kopsov? And it's another one for Whitehead. Dream start for the British driver to try to recover those positions immediately. But George Boothby then leads ahead of Valentin Barrier, and he's already got a second advantage, so wasting no time at all. Hutchinson in the mix, still in 3rd place. Gary Huang losing a position out of the stops. Tansvid's a hacker. Big drag race he had towards Lake On there, up in towards P5, and then it's Correcas, Samir Fox, Steinbrenner down towards P8. They're swapping of positions as there's another drag race towards Bonchemont there, and it's Kopsov ahead of Walsingham, swapping between Noah Eder and Antonov. They're almost 3 wide on the exit. That's going to get busy on the run up in towards the bus stop chicane there, surely, as Antonov now trying to go around the outside. Contact between the pair of them. BMW's got wide up ahead as well. Antonov having to skip the second part of the apex there. Walsingham bumping doors with Kopsov on the exit there, but they all get through there fairly cleanly. And defending the inside line now is the Honda towards La Sourcen, just in front of the Mercedes. Gamble trying to get involved up the inside. Excuse me, has no reader, trying to get back past Antonov, but surely the Honda is going to be able to out-drag the Porsche as they head up towards Lake On for the next series of drag races, and the Honda just managing to get in front before they get there. But here comes Tan Vince, a hacker, trying to make moves in the early stages of the race. The number 28 car well out of position for his Elo, but he is putting on a stellar performance in the opening laps of this race. But the Ferrari straight line speed of Gary Huang is very competitive, and the Audi unable to get past for the time being. How's it faring further down the order? Schaefer and Kopsov swapping positions in towards Lake On. White flags out for somebody. Lavrushin has gone across the inside apex there, slots in behind. No Reader has gone past in all of that as well. Walsingham having to defend the inside line immediately. Samuel Ratz trying to go down the inside. Out Bruxelles, so is Walsingham onto Antonov. I think the Mercedes has got it done. No Reader trying to follow him through in the background. Samuel Ratz side by side as well with Lavrushin as they go in towards No Name corner, swapping between Makotsky and Vitter further down the order. And Samuel Ratz unable to make that one stick in the end. Maybe finds another opportunity towards towards the inside line, into board their Ferrari, unable to get towards that inside line, so the Honda will hold on for the time being then, so the number 26 car stays inside the top 20. Meanwhile, Noah Reeder immediately putting the pressure back on towards Antonov, the middle sector, in favour of the Porsche, and side by side Antonov deep on the brakes. Porsche trying to go all the way around the outside, it's going to be squeezed out onto the exit. They're trying to keep a nose alongside as they head towards Stavilo corner there. He's got it alongside the number 9 car, is then going to be side by side as they head through in towards 16. It's going to be tricky to make it through there. Great respectful racing between those two, but surely as we go on board with Noah Reeder, watch the Honda pull away as they head farther up the hill. Almost contact between the pair of them as they get towards Blanchimont there. We need to look further up though. Hutchinson unable to do anything, but what about Steinbrenner versus Samuel Thock on the run in towards the bus stop chicane? He can't make it stick, but what about Luke Whitehead down the inside of Henrik Gamble towards bus stop chicane in towards P10? Great stuff from him. No Reeder contacted in the bus stop chicane. Couple of cars centre wide. Samuel Ratz off the circuit as well. Antonov moving several positions, and now it's almost 3 abreast on the run up towards La Source there. So contact between those two. I'm sure the stewards will be having a look at that in just a moment. Sasha Vassner trying to get involved in all this side by side as they head through turn 1 for the 3rd time at the front of his field. Almost 2 seconds a gap now between Boothby and Valentin Barres, so wasting no time at all. Sean Tempest getting ahead of Nico Pendon. Several drivers side by side further down the order as well. Tichanos having to slot in behind Benny Vitter on the run through Eau Rouge and into Radion. Now Marvin Vessel's got off and is in the wall. Thankfully isn't collected by any further drivers there, and we've got a big series of runs up further up the field. We'll check them side by side. Marco Bischoff going wide, losing position to Steinbrenner. Now it's Bischoff and then Gerardis and Gamble losing positions as well. Further down the order, Pendon and Tempest side by side as they head through the exit of turn 9 there. The Finnish driver coming out on top in all of that, and they are absolutely nose to tail. Look at this, just behind. Philip Gross trying to go down the inside. McCoskey fighting off Samuel Ratz, is going all the way around the outside at turn 10 there, but can't make it stick in the Ferrari. In actual fact, may come under pressure in just a moment now from Benny Vitter. Let's go for the cut by Rui Nunez, almost in the diffuser for a second for the German driver, but thankfully they all make it through there safe and sound. George Boothby loving life at the front of the field at the moment. 2:17.0 from the British driver, fastest lap of the race so far. Just behind, there's a bit of a swap position between Nunez and Tichanos has managed to get by, and there's someone else trying to go down the inside. That is Kirill trying to go down the inside of Philip Game in the number 36 Porsche, side by side through there. Marvin Vessel's brought out yellow flag again on the exit pull on, retired to the pit, so Mercedes driver not having the day that he would have wanted, and it all kicks off again on the run up towards the bus stop chicane. We'll see if we can catch each of these moves. It's going to be tricky to catch them all. It's very busy in the midfield with the likes of McCoskey, Philip Gross, Samuel Ratz, Benny Vitter battling just outside of the top 20 positions. Then Philip Gross has got a lot of company in the form of that BMW, but is no slouch on the run up towards the bus stop chicane, and McCoskey trying to look for that outside line. I don't think he's going to quite get it. Philip Gross doing a great job fending off, but McCoskey's made it stick, and now he's alongside on the exit of turn 20. They're trying to outtrack the McLaren. Side by side stuff in the background as well as they head towards La Source, but this is incredible towards turn 1 once more. It's been side by side with so many of these drivers almost non-stop. Philip Gross trying to fend off the BMW just behind. Samuel Ratz will get involved in this one, no doubt. Rui Nunez down the inside of Komisaruk in the background as well. Dom Healy losing 2 positions on the exit there. It's much cleaner and much quieter at the front of the field. It's all about the mid-pack right now. So Philip Gross has maintained position for now, as McCoskey has to almost avoid the McLaren on the exit of Radion there, because he was closing up very quickly in a big slipstream towards Lake On there, swapping of positions actually between Noah Reeder and Nico Pendon. Another BMW trying to make a move. He's made that one stick. What about McCoskey versus Philip Gross, maintaining the inside line? Outside not going to work for the Polish driver this time, and he's hung out to dry. Samuel Ratz trying to get involved in this as well, but he's got to be careful of Vitter and Tichanos just behind. Rui Nunez making up position. Komisaruk has got Game now down the inside in towards Bruxelles, going a little bit wide in the Aston Martin. Porsche trying to side his way out towards the inside with number 10 car trying to fight back on the exit as they head in towards No Name corner. Switch back for the Porsche perhaps, but I think the Aston Martin, does he have the momentum on the exit? Look at that in the diffuser immediately for the Porsche, but I don't think as they get towards Bourne there, surely as the Aston Martin natural fact got a little bit wide, keeping the nose up on on the inside is Game, trying to see if he can then go around the outside, heading in towards the next turn. That's going to get very difficult. Into 13, a little bit of contact, and he goes off on the exit there, losing 2 positions in the process. Also swapping is Jan Drexler as well, with Dom Healy going all the way around the outside in the Aston Martins. They get towards Stavlo corner then, and it has been full stop, non-stop action in the early stage of this race. But would we expect anything else here in the Pro Series? Dom Healy does manage to get through, and there's going to be another heap of drag races further up the order. My graphics having a little bit of issue catching up. Marco Bischoff, Steinbrenner, Luke Whitehead all swapping around. There's been something just in front as well between the likes of Korekis in all that. But Steinbrenner, BMW ahead of Marco Bischoff towards La Source they go, as white flag out for Tanzvin Zahaka. May went a little bit wide on the exit of La Source there, but no harm done in the end. Just behind Henrik Gamble and Manos Gerardis side by side on the run in towards Eau Rouge, but the BMW is surely going to have to fight back in the tail end of the Kemmel Straight. Can't make that one stick on the run through there, because otherwise would be eaten up by Matis Lateo, who's waiting for an opportunity in the background. But BMW, good straight line speed again, a little bit of contact between those two. So how is it going to fare as they get towards the end of the Kemmel Straight? Bischoff trying to go around the outside of Steinbrenner, just ahead as well. I think he may be able to make this one stick. Big slide from his teammate Henrik Gamble, just behind. Marco Bischoff has made the move stick, but there's contact between them two, and Whitehead involved in this as well, and the championship leader in towards the gravel, desperately trying to get the car stopped, but has lost several positions in all of that then. So disaster. Such great racing for so long, but eventually it comes undone. Meanwhile, Lateo now trying to capitalise on all that squabbling with Henrik Gamble around the outside. He goes in the Audi, trying to make this one stick. That's tricky as the V10 roars its way into life, trying to go into pool now side by side. That's a tricky one to make stick. Luke Whitehead, that inside contact between Gamble and the Audi as they head through port, and their number 13 car. That's going to be tricky to keep that one under control. Very bumpy on the outside part of the circuit. Brugnara trying to go around the outside now in towards turn 13. Side by side stuff once more between these two. And a little bit of contact. The Audi just about keeping it together, but loses momentum on the exit there. And Brugnara, I think, is going to make it stick, as he, although he's run wide on the exit there off Stavolo. And it's going to be another drag race towards the bus stop chicane. And I need to check on these one by one, because now we've got Hutchinson versus Valentine Barrier, the pole man, as George Boothby has escaped out front. The Ferrari looking left, looking right. He's going to try to go towards the outside line. Valentine very late on the brakes there, and I think will defend the position for the time being. Someone, though, is having maybe better luck, as that's a big moment for Kopsov on the exit. Blanchimont has managed to keep it out of anyone else's path as he holds the brakes, doing exactly what he needs to do. But big moment there for that driver. It's all kicking off. Here's Brugnara's around as well on the second part of the lap, and then Matis Lateo glued to the rear of Robin Schaefer in the BMW ahead. Luke Whitehead somehow and all that is already back up towards P11. Brugnara still around there at the bus stop chicane. Walsingham closing up to the back of these two. BMW versus Audi now on the run into Eau Rouge. It'll be a drag race between the two German manufacturers into their side-by-side stuff. It's going to get tricky. Oh, it's just like Perez versus Ocon, and it's a mistake for Robin Schaefer over the curb, manages to keep out of the wall on the exit, and it's almost 3 wide with that is Walsingham and Marco Bischoff getting involved in this one once more. Robin Schaefer losing momentum. Here comes a Mercedes, and Walsingham trying to take the pair on the outside now as they head in towards Lake Com. Bischoff desperately trying to get back into this race after that contact with the BMW Steinbrenner earlier on. Walsingham gets through. Bischoff unable to make it stick around the outside. He's having another go at where it all went wrong a couple of laps ago. Lateo, though, giving the room towards the inside line. That Russian now has to dive towards the inside line, then to the outside. Honda stuck on the outside of Bruxelles and is eventually going to fall back into line. Meanwhile, further up the order, still battling for the podium positions, Hutchinson versus Valentine Barrier is continuing to squabble, but the Honda driver just about managing to do enough, as meanwhile Game versus Jan Yog in the positions outside of the top 30. Game losing momentum on the exit. Dom Healy, was putting pressure onto the German driver, but maybe able to make it stick as he loses momentum on the apex there. Side by side, the Aston Martin now trying to see if he can side his way around the outside, heading in towards turn 13, and see if he can make that one stick. The British drivers has done it already once, side by side, leaving each other racing room. Great racing. And the 24 car, as he gets the power now, and he's got a better exit, surely have to defend the inside line as they get towards Stavlo, and he doesn't even need to, but he runs wide on the exit. But I think surely the Aston Martin straight line speed will be enough to keep the Porsche Bay, who now may be in a little bit of trouble from the BMWs behind. It's all getting busy though between this scrap for Marco Bischoff, Lateo, Lavrushin, Vassner involved in this one as well. Big dive on the brakes around the outside from the Frenchman, heading in towards the bus stop chicane. Bischoff trying to cut across the nose of the Audi on the exit, using the acceleration of the Porsche to keep himself ahead. But surely as they get towards the Kemmel Straight once more, it's going to get busy. Lavrushin already looking for the inside line. Yellow flag out for somebody. That's the 37 car of Benny Vito has been sent down the order. But there's only so many places that we can look at once. But disappointment there for the German driver. Noah Reeder has lost a position going in towards La Source as well. Bischoff has escaped. Lateo, Lavrushin side by side towards Eau Rouge and Radion. The Honda has to back out in the end. And now it's going to get very busy behind Marco Bischoff as they all head up towards Lake On. There's the view from the rear diffuser there, side by side. Lateo, Lavrushin, also Vassner and Pendon trying to see if they can make up a move on each other. Side by side, Honda going around the outside. We've seen it work for certain drivers. And it is Sasha Vassner's kept the position behind Lateo versus Lavrushin. On the other hand, Lavrushin into the gravel there and is going to lose 2 positions alongside that. Vassner and Pendon reaping the rewards from the contact there and making their way up a couple of spots towards the tail end of that top 15. Gaps have opened up in the top 10. 3 seconds now the lead between George Boothby and Valentin Barry, but at the tail end of the field it is absolute constant action non-stop between these drivers. Vassner, Pendant still applying the pressure to Matis Lateo, as is Samuel Ratz to the likes of Makovsky. We'll try to have a run through the stewards' inquiries at some point when we get an opportunity to see what's going on. Dom Healy now down the inside of Jan Jogen, the Aston Martin. Has made that one stick in towards Bourne there on the power, on the exit, and will keep the position. 29th place there for the British drivers. He has the train of the 2 Porsches, the BMW, the Honda, all following him through turn 13 and 14 now. Checking back into the front of the field and say the gaps were opening up. Hutchinson now in a potential position once again, trying to hang on to the back of Valentin Barrier. But it opens up again. The acceleration of the Honda is superior out of the 2 cars. Sasha Vassner in the Porsche looking towards the outside into the bus stop chicane. Matis Lateo keeping that inside line, but the Porsche stellar on the brakes there from the German driver, and Vassner versus Lateo on the exit now. We'll go on board with Lateo as this is what he sees. The Audi will start to fight back towards La Source. They go Makoski and Edith swapping just behind as well. Number 13 car back down the inside, giving each other just about enough racing room, still side by side on the exit. And who is going to give way on the run in towards Eau Rouge and Radion? Pendon's just waiting for an opportunity to open up as these two, and the Audi does manage to get just about ahead. Vassner surely will have to just sit there and hang in the slipstream, because now he's got the Finnish driver of Pendon to worry about, that's looking for an opportunity and gaining up the hill, but slipstream given to Vassner is allowing him to stick with the Audi just in front. It isn't quite the rocket ship that it used to be. Side by side up ahead of the 29 car. Vassner trying to fight back, and now Pendon siding up the inside, now towards the outside, but I don't think that one's going to work there for the Finnish driver. Has to slot into line. No Reeder's lost 2 positions in all of that to Samuel Ratz and Makoski. He finds himself in 23rd position. Meanwhile, Pendon getting glued to the gearbox of Vassner in towards Bruxelles corner, but unable to make a move stick. And I think almost for the first time in this race, we haven't got somebody side by side with somebody else in the field. Absolute carnage and chaos in the opening 18 minutes of this 90-minute race, but for the most part it's been relatively clean here in the Pro Series. A fantastic action between each of these drivers. Hutchinson again not quite able to stick close enough to Valentin Barrier, although it's been pretty even pace between the top 3, who have managed to run away just a little bit from Gary Huang in 4th place there. Hutchinson gaining in the slipstream all the way down towards the bus stop, gaining 2 tenths almost by the time it gets to the braking zone. But then the acceleration, the power of the Honda as they go towards Eau Rouge and Radion then sends the advantage the other way. Vassner maybe in a position as he has managed to get a good run, but has to back out the throttle to avoid making contact. He needs to time the run here if he wants to try going alongside Lateo. He did it once already in this part of the lap. He's trying it again. Lateo wise to it this time, but he goes a bit deep under brakes there. Vassner fighting back on the exit, acceleration in favour of the number 12, but I don't think it has quite the exit lined up that he would have wanted there to make that one stick. Someone is though recovering Italian of Brugnara deep on the brake, so into the bus stop chicane. Drexler is going to still concede the position in the end though, and I think there's been contact. Something's taken place at the pointier end of the top 20 there, and Vassner now side by side with Sean Tempest. Pendon's managed to escape up front, and the BMW gets the position in the end. Now he's got the McLaren all to worry about, that's glued to the rear of that Porsche, side by side already on the exit of Radion there, and the McLaren taking the slipstream if he can from the BMW. Sean Tempest being very clever just up in front. He wants to keep these two side by side as long as they can, but Philip Gross has managed to get through, and it's Bukowski now trying to make a move as well. Almost through wider contact. That was inevitable through there. Vassner sent off the exit. So is Rat. So is the Hondas just behind there. Bukowski's around, and several positions lost there, and just too busy. 3 into 1 does not go, and losing several positions in the process. And Bukowski all the way now down outside the top 30, and further contact there with Antonov in the Honda, sent into the barrier. So just in space of 3 corners, it's completely gone downhill for the number 22 car, and I'm sure there will be a lot said between those two post-race, because that is a very unusual form of contact. One might claim that there was too late a move, one will claim it was too aggressive from the driver behind, but resulting from it anyway was the number 22 car going straight into the wall, and will lose more and more positions as the other drivers who don't have damage on board their cars understandably side their way through. And of course, remember, pit window in this race as well, so we can't even make his compulsory pit stop just yet and serve that and repair the damage, because he will have to make a pit stop later on in this race in that window to avoid disqualification. Still looking out the weather, it is dry running for the time being. Hutchinson, the closest he has been in a while to Valentine Barrier, but unable to make anything happen as of yet. A little bit of a scrap going on between Ferris, Healy and Kirill in the number 39 car, just up in front. Number 25 gaining in the slipstream towards the outside. The Ferrari goes late on the brakes there for the German driver, and it's deep under brakes, and he has to skip the apex. Surely he clips the sausage curbs on the exit, and the Ferrari trying now to go around the outside, carrying that momentum towards La Sourcen, is going to get the move done. I believe Walsingham has dropped a position to Marco Bischoff in all that, so we'll keep an eye as they head towards Lake Com, as the Ferrari has got through, as Jan Jog has sent one up the inside of Dom Healy shortly after losing that position to the Aston Martin not too long ago, and it's all going to kick off once again, no doubt, as they head towards Lake Com. 22 minutes of this race gone, and it has been non-stop action start to finish. Walsingham unable to fight back against Bischoff, but what about Tichenor versus Noah Reeder? And there is nothing the Porsche can do against the speed of the Ferrari. How are they all faring further down the order? Game trying to make his way past Jan Jog. Antonov making it 3 wide towards Lake On. We saw it end in disaster moments ago on the previous lap. He gets past 1, and then further contact again, and Antonov sends rounds, and the Porsche of Game has been collected and all of that as well. And it didn't work on the previous lap, and it hasn't worked on the second, and I think it was Antonov that was involved in the contact with McCoskey on the previous lap, so McCoskey, he might see that as a little bit of karma for all of what happened there, but it was, I think, Jan Jog that managed to get through that fairly safe in the end, when you saw him completely back out and trying to avoid the contact, and I think he'll be counting his lucky stars after that one. Meanwhile, further up the order, Rat still applying the pressure to Vassner, and a few squabbles going on at the moment. We'll try to take this opportunity to see if we can catch up with what the poor stewards have been subjected to over the first 23 minutes of this race, because they would have had inquiry after inquiry. White flag for a moment from Steinbrenner, who's now got Gerardis all over his gearbox. I think maybe ran wide, and Gerardis immediately trying to capitalise on the opportunity towards the bus stop chicane. Can't make that one stick, and the BMW will still maintain the position for the time being. What about the likes of Rats versus Vassner, the Ferrari? We know how quick that car is in a straight line towards the inside line. Vassner not defending it, and Rats is going to go down towards the inside of the battle for P18, gets it stopped under brakes, and will take the position. I don't think the Porsche can fight back in all of that. White flag for Philip Gross just behind. Didn't quite see what happened to the German driver, but able to keep position. I think in the end, Brugnara has managed to get past Kevin Rowlands in the battle, say inside of the top 30. Meanwhile, at the pointer end of the field, 3.5 seconds still the gap between Boothby and Valentin Barra. The British driver has not looked back since he got in towards the race lead, and the Frenchman has had all sorts of company from the man that's been so consistent throughout the races in this season. Kicking off though again is Vassner and Lavrushin. Rats trying to give the toe to the Porsche, keep those behind side by side as long as he possibly can. Honda then having to go a long way around in towards Lake On there, can't make the move stick in all of that, and in the end will have to find another opportunity. Meanwhile, someone's trying to make it stick already. Is Noah Reeder, who's been left out to dry. Philip Gross getting through, and Komisaruk's coming along as well. In towards turn 10 they go. Bruxelles Aston Martin versus Porsche. Little bit of contact on the exit of the corner there. Noah Reeder maintained that inside line. In towards No Name. We'll go on board Rui Nunez, is watching it all unfold. Noah Reeder maintains the position. Now Nunez trying to go down the inside as they head in towards Pouon then. And the Porsche number 34 car trying to see if he can stay alongside the Aston Martin, giving each other racing room. Komisaruk though has got the extra power, and around the outside he manages to keep the position, but Nunez already looking on the attack into 13, but can't make anything stick in all of that, as Hutchinson closing once more to the back of Valentin Barra in the battle for P2. But the Canadian driver unable to make anything stick as of yet. Gap varying between half a second and 2/10 almost every single lap. But no opportunity as of yet for Hutchinson, as we see once more this battle for 23rd place between Noah Reeder and Komisaruk and Nunez. And Noah Reeder, he's got the Aston Martin gaining in the slipstream towards the bus stop chicane. There's the Portuguese driver of Nunez. Does he fancy a look up the inside? Oh, he does, and a half. And it's almost 3 wide. Almost contact between Komisaruk and Noah Reeder. Barely a paper's width between them. And the number 9 car somehow holds on to the position. Nunez loses a chunk of time in all of that. I think he had to back out completely. He was on such a tight line there. Meanwhile, Healy is trying to now make a move on the inside in towards La Source. Can't get that one done, but someone that has Komisaruk has sent one towards the inside of Noah Reeder. Drag race now between the Aston Martin and the Porsche in towards the next complex through Eau Rouge and Radion. They go glued to one another, nose to tail. We'll head on board the front splitter, wide line from Noah Reeder and all that as well. Surely he'll have to back off a little bit to avoid trying to get a penalty. It's Lavrushin versus Sasha Vassner, and the Honda has finally got the move done, I do believe, and will fend off the Porsche just behind. How does Noah Reeder fare against Rui Nunez? Nunez has made his way through, and then it's Brugnara versus the likes of Jan Yog. I think Jan Yog losing out in all of that because of the straight line speed deficit, but Nunez, great stuff to get down the inside of the K Kramer Racing Esports car and make his way in towards 24th position. Couple of gaps closing in the top 10. Hutchinson and Valentin, as well as Gerardis versus Steinbrenner. And we will desperately try to see if we can get a little bit of a run through the penalty situation in just a moment. A lot of no further actions. 15-second penalty, though, for the number 9 car, and that is being dished out to... trying to see in the server, that's Noah Reeder. So the car that you see, the red Porsche in 25th position on your screen, 15-second penalty, and although I've got a little bit of conflict actually, 15 or 20-second penalty, one way or another, can't quite see in all that, but has gained penalties unfortunately for some instance. Yellow flag for number 22 car, I think that was just for exiting the pits. That is McCoskey that's finally emerged after all the damage that his car has been put through. Number 14 has got a 15-second penalty as well. That's Steinbrenner, likely for the contact between himself and Marco Bischoff, I do believe, as Vassner versus the Ferrari of Tichenor, now trying to go all the way around the outside into the bus stop chicane. He's kept him honest, and Vassner trying to power out there, but he's stuck out on the AstroTurf. We'll go on board. Philip Gross is watching it all unfold just in front of him. He'll try to set up an exit out of Lassour, squeezing Vassner in towards the outside line. German driver trying to keep that Ferrari at bay, does maintain position for now, but we know the power advantage of that Ferrari. I think they tend to run extremely low wing around this circuit, and they are absolutely monstrous over the top of the hill. See, even the McLaren not really able to fight against the Ferrari, who gets it all wrong through there and has to be careful not to take too much in the way of track limits. And there you go, the Porsche, nothing he can do, 3 wide, and the Porsche just absolutely being left for dead between those two there, and trying to catch the view from Vassner. They've both gone past and losing 2 positions there in one run towards Lake On. Nothing that Vassner could do. He defended as hard as he could on the exit of turn 1, but in the end, the McLaren and the Ferrari both having enough of a power advantage. Meanwhile, further down the order, Gamay versus Antonov, having a little bit of swapping of position there between the Porsche and the Honda, as the German driver trying to fend off the number 32 car just behind him now. One of the closest battles that we've got on circuit. Also, Sean Tempest versus Pennon, 2 BMWs going toe-to-toe at the moment, but hasn't been able to make a move on the Finnish driver as of yet, but could set one up in the next series of corners. Other penalty updates, a number 13 car has got a 15-second penalty by the looks of it, and that it goes to Matis Lateo, currently running in P15 there. It's not ideal for him. The number 34 car has also got a 15-second penalty, and I'm trying to track down who that is in the server. Sean Tempest wide on the exit. Blanchmont almost having a major wiggle, and we saw it all go wrong for Kopsov in the Honda earlier. Manages to just about keep it composed and under control, but it's allowed Samuel Ratz to close in to the back of this battle and make it a 3-way fight for P15. Of course, so Lateo with that, for P16 with Pennant, and these drivers likely to inherit some positions after Lateo's penalty. Number 34 car is Rui Nunes. So after that move on Noah Ida, I don't think that was the move that was responsible for the penalty, as Komisayuk, I think, almost went into the back of Vassner there a moment ago. Thankfully, though, managed to keep it out of the gearbox of the Porsche just in front of him. But Nunes getting a penalty, and then both the number 26 and number 22 cars getting 10-second penalties for causing collision. So that goes to McCoskey, I think, for that 3-wide moment. And then the number 26 car is Komisayuk trying to go around the outside of Vassner, who again is defenseless to a straight line speed of some of these other cars. The Aston, though, still has to try to make it stick in towards the next part of the complex. Porsche fighting back as they head through the next couple of corners. Komisayuk, though, going for the switchback, trying to get the inside line in towards the next turn as they head to Bruxelles, and the number 10 can keep it on the inside of the Porsche there, squeezing Vassner out as much as he dares before they get to No Name. But the Porsche has maintained the position ahead. Another switchback potentially, but loses too much momentum over the curb there for the Aston Martin. So Vassner will hold on to that position for the time being. It's getting pretty tight, though, between the likes of Pennon, Tempest and Ratz, with barely just over half an hour into this race. There's still a full hour to go. Crucially, no changes in the weather in the near future for these drivers, so looks like it could well be a dry race for at least the vast majority of the action today. And with the amount of excitement and drama we've had so far, that maybe just as well. I'm trying to track down who the 26 car is. That is Lav Rushin in 19th position. There's also got a 10-second penalty, and I think the stewards still making their way through an abundance of inquiries that we have had in the stage of race. White flag out for Walsingham, but it's Tempest now trying to defend from Samuel Ratz, who's going towards the outside line. Oh, and there's further contact, and Tempest completely getting it wrong under brakes. Ratz is sent around. Pennon somehow also kept it pointing in the right direction and comes out fairly unscathed, but Tempest will have lost a lot in that. He's lost at least, I think, 3 positions. Someone that's in the middle of losing one as well is Sasha Vassner again, as Komazayuk is trying to go now around the outside in towards Lassource. Brugnara versus Dom Healy, I think, is also taking place just behind Vasta. Staying strong, Nunes almost sent around there by Noah Reader. A little bit of contact between the two Porsches there, and there's going to be at least a couple of drag races once more as they head up towards Lake On between a few drivers, and we'll try to catch him. Each on board! Oh, as Komazayuk goes into the back of Vasta then, and Vasta barely keeping out of the wall. I think he did actually make a little bit of contact in the end, but fairly minimal damage, all things considered. Nunes, no Reader now, almost making it 3 wide. Komazayuk losing a couple of positions now as they get towards Lake On. Late on the brakes is Noah Reid, and the Aston Martin has lost the 2 positions there. Philip Gross and Tichnos. Oh, there's a big moment there for the McLaren into the wall for the German driver, and that's going to be heavy damage on the front of that car. So what went from an overtaking opportunity looks to be almost a race-ending disaster there for the 31. Might be able to keep it going until the pit stop phase of the race. Now side by side with Komazayuk, who's also had a very busy time on the last lap. But unfortunately, number 31 car making that mistake all by himself. He was left the room, I think. We caught it pretty late on, but there's further contact between himself now, and I think that was with Komazayuk. Manages to keep it in the right direction, and 39 cars around. It's absolute chaos here. That's Kirill that's gone around in all of that, and we caught that was slightly off our cameras. We'll try to see if we can see how that unfolded. And there was a touch between himself and maybe that was the McLaren. That's so busy between these cars, but unfortunately, Tank Slapper came back to bite him. Has got going again. Meanwhile, Jan Jog, Drexler swapped position, Benny Vitter and Sasha Vassner, as Vassner continues to try to recover positions after that big impact over the top of Radion then. The top 10, meanwhile, they've had such a quiet time in comparison to the midfield. Valentine slightly faster on the last lap, actually, as George Boothby, for the first time in a while, was not lapping in the 2:17s. So Valentine able to close the gap up. Hutchinson, though, keeping him honest without a shadow of a doubt. It's kicking off once again as Pendon versus Samuel Ratz. They've had a busy couple of laps through no fault of their own, and the two of them, I think, running a little bit wounded. Wide, though, for the Finnish drivers. The pit window just opens up. That could be a blessing for the McLaren of Philip Grossen. Side by side, Ferrari versus BMW, and I think Pendon's going to back off there and let the Ferrari have the position. Whether or not he chooses to fight back on the run up towards Lake On, though, we'll have to see. That was a big wiggle there for the Ferrari. How did Samuel Ratz keep that one pointing in a straight line? Pendon, but if he wasn't trying to take the position, he's certainly in a position to do it now, and he is going to sweep around the outside of Samuel Ratz, who is trying to fight back under brakes. Is he keeping the Finnish driver from going towards the apex entirely? Can't make it stick. Meanwhile, Nunes, Noah Ida and Komazayuk squabbling once more. The Aston Martin has reclaimed the position. No, Reader all over the curb on the exit of Lake On there. Can't make it stick for the time being as he's putting pressure onto the Aston Martin in front. I think also Walsingham Mateo may have swapped positions in the battle inside the top 15. Wide moment for Komazayuk. Porsche almost down the inside. Couldn't quite make that one stick, though, in the end. Switchback, perhaps, for Noah Reader. And the Aston Martin flashing the lights there. Not often something that you see in all of that, but has maintained position for the time being. Meanwhile, Luke Whitehead has lost the position to Robin Schaefer. So the busy time he has had in this race currently finds himself in P12 in this race, and not where he would have wanted to be. Of course, the championship leader, and I would imagine this could well be one of his drop score rounds if he is unable to make his way further up the order. Ida versus Nunes and Brugnara getting involved in all of this as well. Vitter versus Drexler is a pretty close fight between those two drivers, as Samuel Ratz and Pendon once again having a drag race towards Blanchimont Corner, side by side, very fast section of the circuit. Samuel Ratz, though, does make the move. Did go a little bit off track there. Whether or not there'll be anything said about that, we'll have to wait and see. But number 30 car does make his way in towards P16 there, as Pendon then diving straight into the pits. Meanwhile, Gerardis versus Steinbrenner, the two BMWs, a couple more drivers going into the pits very early on in the opening parts of that pit window opening. And then Steinbrenner having to defend from Gerardis. Whitehead as well, very close to the back of Robin Schaefer, but I'm not sure he'll be able to do anything about it. Steinbrenner, though, versus Gerardis towards Lake on there, around the outside. The Greek driver tries to go. Can he get the overlap? We've seen it time and time again, but Steinbrenner manages to keep that position in the end and will actually extend his advantage ever so slightly, and Whitehead was unable to do anything about Schaefer in front. Marco Bischoff has been closing up over the last few laps. Oh, there's an uncharacteristic mistake there from Whitehead on the exit of turn 9. Manages to use all of his talent inside the cockpit of that car to keep it pointing in a straight line, but that certainly would have been a heart-in-mouth moment for the championship leader. Hutchinson, closest he has been in a very long time, especially in this part of the lap. Maybe an opportunity could open up for the Ferrari as they head up towards bus stop chicane, as it's Bischoff versus Whitehead. Bischoff has made the move down the inside in towards Bourne then, so the Porsche is through for the Kate Kramer Racing esports car, and Whitehead now having to settle for P13 in all of that. Here comes the Ferrari, though. He's got to time this run, absolutely glued to the rear diffuser of Valentine. It's the first time that these two have been side by side, I think, all race, and the Canadian driver trying to go all the way around the outside out of the bus stop chicane, but he goes too deep under brakes and he can't make that one stick, and George Boothby will be grinning him to himself at the P1 spot at the moment, because the more these two fight, the more it will allow him to continue to break free. Only 3 seconds the gap between himself and the Frenchman, and Jade Hutchinson losing out significant time on the back of that squabble then, as closest to cars on circuit right now is actually Whitehead and Bischoff after all of that scrapping. We will, as Whitehead dives into the pits then, so he doesn't want to waste any more time. Of course, did take a bit of damage on board that car with all of the scraps that we have had in this race when there was that contact between Steinbrenner and Bischoff. Yellow flag out for a couple of drivers. I think that is for those exiting the pit lane. And we'll see as Ferris now trying to make a move past Pennanen, who has just emerged from the pits in the Ferrari. So thank you very much. Oh, it's almost gets a heck of a punt from the BMW into the gearbox of that car. Thankfully, though, Pennanen, quick reactions to avoid contact between himself and the Ferrari there. Norida now emerging from the pits. The McLaren of Philip Gross will have a massive speed advantage and will glide his way past the McLaren. There's the Porsche of Norida dropping back after all of that. It's a tricky pit exit with all of this, because even if you come out well ahead of cars that you are battling with, they have such a speed advantage that they can just so easily end up overtaking you once more. Further penalties, the number 32 car has got a total of 25 seconds worth of penalties for a couple of instances as of late, as Gamay and Nunez very close to one another on circuit in this squabble for 28th position. Gamay almost thinking about going down the inside there, but can't quite make that one stick, and that was Antonov there that's got those penalties, so not what the driver that's currently in 35th place would have wanted in all of that. 10-second time penalty for the number 15 car as well. That's Jordan Tempest, and that would have been for that rather unfortunate snooker kind of cannon effect that he had onto the backs of Rats and I think was it Pennanen in towards the bus stop chicane after that all kicked off. Gary Huang, who was running around in a fairly lonesome P4, goes into the pits as well. It's going to be really interesting to see in the second half of the race as we look to approach the halfway marker, as Whitehead now emerges from the pits there. Won't be battling with anybody as he comes out onto the Kemmel Straights, so that allow him to really execute the undercut strategy. And Whitehead should be a pretty good benchmark to see how quick you can go on those fresh tyres. Of course, could be still carrying a bit of damage on board the Porsche. You may not have repaired any damage because you can lose a chunk of time, but maybe would have considered it because we do have a longer race distance for our drivers to deal with tonight. Not that with some of the racing that we have had that you may particularly think it, as Pennanen was almost pushing the Ferrari of Ferris along through Lake On there. And there's the Audi of Tanzvin Zahaka, who's running in P4. So these two back markers need to get out of the way pretty swiftly because the Audi is losing time. Pennon manages to get out of the way, and hopefully Ferrez will also manage to do the same in a minute. He has actually broken free a little bit in all of that, so definitely I think some time lost for the Audi, and he is in a bit of a scrap in terms of long-term pace alongside Gary Huang and that earlier pit stop. With the fresh tyres on board that Ferrari, going to make it very difficult, I think, for Tanzvin Zahaka to recover the position through the overcut. Pennon almost glued to the back of the Audi. Maybe that's why it's a bit tricky, of course, old tyres versus new. Even if you are a faster car on circuit, as Kopsov brings out yellow flag, also just exiting the pits now for the number 18 car. That's the difference in pace that fresh tyres can make can be so substantial that it really can make some of the fastest drivers on circuit have fairly equal footing pace with those a bit further down in the order. A gap that's been pretty busy over the last few laps is Bischoff versus Robin Schaefer. Bischoff does seem to have a setup on board this car this evening that's allowed him to challenge certain cars on circuit in terms of straight line speed. Valentine Barrier, crucially, first driver in the top 3 to make a pit stop. Hutchinson and Boothby staying out for the time being. Bischoff, how late on the brakes does he dare to go? There was almost contact there between himself and Schaefer, barely a hair's width as they got to that initial apex for the chicane. But Bischoff absolutely glued. Surely he sends one up the inside out of the source. He's got to compromise the exit of the BMW, and that's exactly what he does as they head in towards the first turn there. And Bischoff, where is he on our screen? Bischoff, oh, he's got very wide. He disappeared off the camera for a moment there, and we'll try to catch that looking more focused at Bischoff, and goes very deep under brakes, almost off the track entirely. And Schaefer, as calm and composed as you like, reclaims a position, but he's going to have some company perhaps on the run towards Lacon. That Porsche has been surprisingly quick in a straight line, though it is carrying some extra damage. That won't be helping the straight line speed, but Marco Bischoff, uncharacteristically in the Porsche, able to gain in the slipstream over the BMW side by side. It's all gone wrong between a BMW and a Porsche through here before, of course, that incident involving Marco Bischoff as well, as he came out of that incident very poorly. But no contact between himself and Schaefer on this occasion, and the two stay going nose to tail through that sector of the lap and pushing each other as hard as they dare. But crucially, no further incidents. Number 27 car has brought out a yellow flag. There's Jan Jog just emerging from the pit lane. Do imagine we'll see quite a bit of yellow flags dished out for that. We saw a white flag a moment ago for Oliver Ferrez. I think could have been getting out the way of Grantus Correcus, if I'm not mistaken, in that. Valentine Barriers just emerged out of the pit lane. Crucially for him, he is in completely clear air then. Much bigger delay than usual for what we would expect to see for when drivers emerging out of the pit lane, because it is just such a long pit lane. I think almost 2 minutes you can spend in there. Hutchinson now into the pits, so he is immediately reacting to the stop from Valentine there. Vassner versus Kirill on the exit. Blanchard on their BMW off the track. Maybe something to be said about that. Oh, I thought there was going to be a contact there between those two. Vassner down towards the inside at the bus stop chicane. Has made the move stick there and will get past the BMW and all of that. There was also, I think, some scrabbling between Gerardis, Whitehead and Walsingham as two of those cars emerged from the pit lane. Same goes for Samuel Ratz and Lateo, Healy, Tichenos all emerging from the pits as well. No Reader, I think, has just sent one up the inside of Philip Gross. We didn't quite catch the beginning of that because these very different lines through that part of the circuit. These two, though, continuing still to scrap there. No Reader also flashing the lights a little bit, so maybe something did take place somewhat off camera. We'll have to see if there is a battle between those two at the end of the Kemmel Straight. Samuel Ratz applying the pressure immediately after they've emerged out of the pits to the back of Tichenos. But the two Ferraris obviously on equal new fresh tyres. Also looking more and more unlikely that we will have any rain later on in this race. which again, I'm sure that a lot of these drivers will be relieved about, especially having made their pit stops, because it does make it all the more tricky to try to tackle those conditions if you are not on the ideal tyre compound. But sometimes you just have to bear the brunt of that wet weather transition between the two sets of conditions. Hutchinson now on the move. See, whereabouts is Valentine Barrett? So he is just making his way towards Eau Rouge now. Then Hutchinson could very well be in the clear here of the Honda. They weren't too far apart. Hutchinson has emerged very far ahead of the Frenchman, and I don't think Valentine, although he will gain tremendously on the run up towards Les Combes, is nowhere to be seen versus Ferrari. So the overcut strategy, maybe Valentine had a bit of a compromised pit exit, we can't be too sure, but one way or another, Valentine has lost a position. So Hutchinson now, Mr. Consistent during a lot of this championship, gets that Ferrari into what is effective P2 in this race, as yellow flags emerging again out for some other cars. And Steinbrenner versus Whitehead. I think surely Whitehead is going to go sweeping on by the BMW, and does. In actual fact, Steinbrenner can get a little bit awkward potentially, because Makowski, who is a lap down, maybe looking try to make his way through, as he feels like he is faster, but I think Steinbrenner is going to hold on to that position for now. That can get very awkward in GT3 racing, as they go flashing of lights there in actual fact from Walsingham, and Makowski immediately obeying all of that and getting well clear of the drivers on the lead lap. Only a few drivers left to make their pit stops. George Boothby, your race leader since the very beginning, is one of them, alongside Fock, Bischoff, Gamble, Komisaruk. Still have the opportunity for certain drivers to extend their stint if they want to, but I do actually think now every driver that hadn't made a pit stop yet has now come into the pits. I tell you what though, Boothby will be pretty pleased with the outcome that he has had between the likes of Hutchinson and Barrier, because these two scrapping to some degree, seemingly having lost some time as well in the overcut in one form or another, did benefit Hutchinson. And I think George Boothby should emerge well clear of these two drivers. He's just about to reach the end of the pit lane in a moment, and Hutchinson and Valentine almost side by side on the run up towards Eau Rouge already. It's going to get very busy between our race or battle for the race lead. Hutchinson maintains a position for the time being. Valentine has to back out of that one, and whereabouts is George Boothby? He is well up the Kemmel Straight, and so there'll be no further squabbling between those two. And Valentine, actual fact, backing out a little bit above and beyond there, and as a result, losing quite a bit of time as Karekas and Tanvin Zahaka making their way past. Samir Fox has just come out of the pits alongside the likes of Gamble. Gerardis has made his way in towards the top 10 there in the BMW. Of course, certain drivers that have had penalties applied to them already will have served those penalties in the pits, and if they get any further later on in the race, that hopefully for them that they won't, they will be applied post-race. And then there is the opportunity, of course, I think, for some post-race appeals after that for anything that happens very late on the race that perhaps our stewards can't quite get around to, because they have had a very busy time. Although I think, considering the level of intensity that this circuit brings out, that is being relatively clean for the most part, as Komisai losing momentum, having just emerged from the pits, and Brugnara in the Ferrari, who was sent around earlier on in this race at the bus stop, making his way past the number 10 Aston Martin, and it gets up into 19th position. And the Aston just about holding on to the top 20 at the moment. Kevin Rowlands versus Oliver Ferris as well for 23rd place is now the closest fight on circuit. We'll go on board the rear diffuser. Benny Vitter getting involved in this one as well, making a three-way tussle between the Ferrari, Aston Martin and BMW. And now the entire grid has served their one and only compulsory pit stop. Jan Drexler is still in the pit lane at the moment, as George Boothby has just reclaimed the first place position in this race at the front end of the field then. and has 3.5-second lead over Hutchinson. Valentine 0.7 seconds behind the Canadian driver, but did look to be maybe the faster driver once they got the tyres initially up to temperature, so maybe able to reclaim the ground they lost not too long ago after having to back out of the throttle. Jan Drexler will plummet down the leaderboard as those who have made their pit stop already make their way past, as we have Steinbrenner versus Luke Whitehead. These two have had quite a busy time. I think Whitehead was caught out on the contact between Steinbrenner and Marco Bischoff. Steinbrenner now has served that penalty through there, almost into the rear of the Porsche, through Radion, just about manages to keep enough room between himself and the Veloce esports car of your championship leader, who is having a very difficult day in the office, and Steinbrenner making his way easily up into P2 in the end. A straight line speed, just way too much for the Porsche to try to contend with. Samuel Ratz is perhaps going to come under pressure from Mathis Lateo as they run towards Lecom. But the Audi, I don't think, has quite the straight line speed to compete with this Ferrari that is one of the quickest cars that we have on circuit today. Busy times between Witte, Ferrez, Drexler dropping down after his pit stop and all that. We didn't see how Witte and Kevin Rowlands, I think, swapping positions with Ferrez, and the Ferrari driver losing a couple of positions over the last lap and going down to 24th place then, as it's all getting very busy just outside of the top 20, and now almost a 4-5-way fight between these drivers. Fairly open gaps at the front of the field, as Game has had a very curious instant at the end of Lake Como. He was battling with Kirill and in towards turn 7 then, and gets it all crossed up in the cockpit of that Porsche. Manages to just about gather it all up in the end, but does lose a chunk of time for his troubles, unfortunately, as now Samuel Ratz versus Tichenor managed to escape a little bit from Mathis Lateo, although maybe the Frenchman won't be too bothered about that, because if he watches these two Ferraris scrapping on the next drag race towards the bus stop chicane, maybe he'll be able to benefit in all that. Kevin Rowlands has lost a chunk of positions on the exit. Oh, very curious incident. Just run completely wide in the Aston Martin and loses 4 positions in the process there, so not what he would have wanted out of that. So the German driver making a bit of a mistake there. Ratz versus Tichenor, no changes between those two. We've got Bischoff and Robin Schaefer again very close to one another as the pit stop does come to a close, but everyone having served their pit stops now in this race as we enter the final 35 minutes of round 9 here in the Case King Pro Series. Bischoff again glued to the rear diffuser of the number 7 car in front of him, almost pushing him along as they get towards the end of the Keppel Straight. They're very deep on the brakes. It's the number 2 car trying to go around the outside. It hasn't always worked for him. Little bit of contact between himself and Robin Schaefer, and in the end has to go for a switchback move. Can you get the acceleration and the drive towards Bruxelles? He's trying to keep a nose alongside there. Schaefer opens up the door, and I don't think he needed to, but in the end I think may have compromised his line enough to allow Bischoff to get through, unless he can fight back towards no name. Great side-by-side stuff between these two. Bischoff though has to run very wide on the exit of turn 11, and whether or not there'll be anything said from Schaefer and all of that, we'll have to wait and see. But in the end, Bischoff able to get the move done, and now what he has to do is he really has to concentrate in this next series of corners where the Porsche is quick and try to extend enough of an advantage so that Slipstream can't allow the number 7 car to reclaim that position and cause these two to lose more time. Meanwhile, Tanvin Zahaka has the Lithuanian driver of Grantas Korekas, the number 1 car, number 1 man on the LFM platform, keeping him company, but the Audi doing just about enough to hold position for the time being. Someone, though, is in a bit of trouble with Tichenor, as Samuel Ratz has gone all the way around the outside at turn 13. It's gone for Matilas Teo's perspective as he now looks towards the outside as the 2 Ferraris in front of him still scrapping through Stavlo. But a little bit of contact. Oh, I think Tichenor might have gone off, and he has, and into the wall. That's going to be very awkward for the Aston Martin and Copper Zayuk, who has to slam on the brakes. Tom Healy is going to say thank you very much, scythes his way past the pair of them and jumps up into 18th position. but that got very dramatic very quickly between those drivers there, and the Ferrari of Tichnos might have something to say about Samuel Ratz in all of that. We'll have to wait and see. But that was very unfortunate as well for Komisayu, who just appeared on the scene, had nowhere to go, and just had to slam on the brakes at a part of the circuit that typically you'd be completely flat out through, so just losing a significant amount of time in all of that. Sean Tempest and Oliver Ferret still squabbling for 23rd position between 25 and the number 15 car. BMW has shown to have very good straight line speed time and time again, as that is certainly what has kept the company between Schaefer and Bischoff. Bischoff doing just about enough on the last lap to keep that BMW of Schaefer behind. So perhaps now with a clean run through Sector 2 for the first time in a very long time, as that's a very wide line for Sean Tempest. And in actual fact, he might have some company now from Jan Drexler in the fellow BMW, that's now trying to carry that momentum all the way around the outside as they head up towards Lake Om. Then they'll appear back on our cameras, and the Ferrari of Ferris has escaped in all of that. Drexler all the way around the outside. Has he made it stick? And he has. Opportunistic stuff there from the number 23 car, and makes his way through. Jan Jog brought out the white flag. That was for backing off, I do believe, to allow your race leader George Boothby, who's been on fire in the second half of the race. 2:16.8, and now 4.5 second lead over Giant Hutchinson, who has been able to gap Valentin Barrett. So it is Honda, Ferrari, Honda at the front end of the field, and Valentin, despite his exceptional qualifying pace, hasn't quite been able to maintain that in the race, but still run out on for a very comfortable podium if he keeps it all neat and tidy and out of any track limit issues that could see him get a drive-through penalty. All of his drivers could be on pretty thin eggshells with all of that. Or thin ice even. But the number 13 car of Matis Lateo putting pressure on to Samuel Ratz. And the Audi, it used to be an absolute rocket ship in ACC, but after an abundance of BOP changes since that car first made its way into the platform, of course, this is the Evo edition that all of our drivers here on LFM, I think, more or less are now using. Doesn't have the same level of acceleration top end that it once did have, but still pretty good platform overall. Lateo trying to make best use of it. Steinbrenner bringing out the white flag there, and what has happened there for the number 14 car? Is that an incident over the top of Eau Rouge, because he's lost positions now to the likes of Whitehead and Walsingham, and you can see there he is. That was Robin Schaefer and Marco Bischoff just up ahead. So now as he comes into Eau Rouge and over the crest on Radion, what's it going to be for the BMW then? Goes over the exit curb, and very unusually, I could only imagine that he's slowed down to try to avoid a corner cutting penalty. That's the only explanation that I can think of for what we're seeing there for Steinbrenner, because it definitely didn't have a moment over those curves, but maybe felt like he was cutting it a bit too fine. And if he is on the border of getting a drive-through penalty, it is more worth sacrificing just a few seconds for the sake of a drive-through penalty, because that would definitely be game over. George Boothby absolutely flying along out the front of the field, half a second faster than anybody else in the server, after having made it relatively close between some of our drivers at the pointier end of the field in the first half of the race. One of the most winningest drivers in the Pro Series, who has really got to grips with the Honda this season. He was on track potentially for a victory at Watkins Glen before contact between himself and McCormack saw him drop down the order, and Valentin was able to capitalise. Robin Schaefer showing nose up the inside of Marco Bischoff towards the bus stop chicane there, but the BMW not quite able to do anything about the Porsche in front of him. Yellow flag for number 32 car. That is Antonov, and Antonov has just dropped back to the pits there. So what has happened to the Honda, who has had a very busy and eventful race? I think has unfortunately also taken a couple of penalties during this opening phase as well. And as he gets towards Lake On there, makes his way through the first apex, gets a big slide, and then just says that he's had enough, and unfortunately retires the car to the pit. So a very unhappy man in the cockpit of that car, and wanting to have no further parts, unfortunately, in the action. Someone that is still very much locked into battle is Marco Bischoff and Robin Schaefer for the battles inside of the top 10, the remaining position to score a top 10 finish here at Spa today. As with 27 minutes left on the clock, definitely no rain on the way for this race. And it's definitely an element of chaos, which perhaps is just as well that it wasn't present in all of this, because these drivers have certainly had quite the busy set of circumstances to deal with anyway. Matheus Leitão and Samuel Ratz still running very close to one another. Just further down, Komisaruk versus Dom Healy. And another battle that is emerging, Walsingham versus Luke Whitehead. Also notice a very wide line in the end for Walsingham, and that's sort of understeered the Mercedes at Bull there that I was concerned about. We did see him running very quickly in qualifying trim, as Whitehead again makes a bit of a mistake. So I get a feeling that the championship leader has not repaired that damage on board the Porsche and is now getting more and more drivers for company, and it's looking more and more likely this will be one of the drop scores for Luke Whitehead, as now Walsingham in that big bad roaring Mercedes makes his way up towards Blanchimont there, trying to see if he can find an opportunity under brake to Porsche. Obviously Stella in towards the bus stop chicane, but the Mercedes is gaining all the time there. Luke Whitehead not defending. Oh, he looked like he was going to go middle of the road defense there, but he's outbraked himself, and another mistake there for the championship leader Walsingham, now with the better acceleration out of the final chicane there. But the Porsche still able to hold on to that for the time being. But surely we would anticipate when they get to the end of the Kemmel Straight, as Steinbrenner's also looking to get involved in this as well. Not the best of lines from Whitehead either, as they make their way towards Eau Rouge. And I think Walsingham deliberately staying a little bit out of the slipstream there. Doesn't want to receive too much aero wash off the front end of that car. Otherwise, he can get in a tricky scenario for track limits. He's got to be careful anyway, but is gaining in the slipstream all the way as they run up towards Les Combes. Komisaruk and Dom Healy also swapping around as well. Walsingham down the inside now of Luke Whitehead. I don't know if there's anything that the championship lead is going to be able to do about that Visceral Esports Mercedes, and it's very close between the pair of them. Whitehead desperately trying to use the Porsche's strengths to keep himself in this. He's gone for the switchback, may be able to get down the inside at Bruxelles there, but I think Walsingham may have just about got it covered as they make their way to that part of the lap. And it's also very close once again between Leitão and Ratz as they headed in towards Les Combes there, but no swapping of positions between the Audi and the Ferrari this time around. Same goes for Komisaruk versus Healy. What about Jan Drexler and Oliver Ferez and the BMW down the inside in the battle for 23rd position, and Sean Tempest, Kevin Rowlands all locked into this scrap as well, trying to get involved in this. Drexler immediately running away from the Ferrari. I think I saw a flash of lights there from the number 25 car there. I'm not sure if he was unhappy about something that took place through that series of corners. Didn't see anything too untoward if there was some scrapping going on. White flag for Philip Gross, who may have made a mistake through Les Combes there, as he is no reader, and Philip Gamay scrapping just in front of the McLaren driver. And just, I think, a little bit of oversensitivity from the overlay in all of that, but something that is definitely taking place at the moment. Sean Tempest trying to go for a move past the Ferrari in towards turn 13 there. Can't make it stick this time around. We know how quick the Ferraris are down the back straight and the climb up the hill. Steinbrenner also applying the pressure to Luke Whitehead, who is running wounded. Walsingham escaping into P12 and able to gap the Porsche behind there. So Whitehead, I think, might be under a little bit of pressure. The BMW does seem to have had the better advantage in terms of straight line speed over a lot of cars as of late. We also saw it at Donington Park, and definitely one of the strengths of that car at certain circuits. Paul Ricard as well, I know, a very strong element for it there, but Steinbrenner now trying to recover positions after the incident he was involved in earlier on in the race, and I think it's going to be a pretty easy move in the end. Walsingham giving the toe to Whitehead to try and keep these two side by side as long as he possibly can, but Steinbrenner all the way around the outside he goes, and the number 14 car into 13th place. Whitehead unable to do anything. What about Samuel Ratz versus Mathis Lateo, the closest the Audi has been in a long time, trying to go to the inside, but he can't. Ratz wise to it, holds that inside line. Lateo, though, keeping towards the middle of the circuit as long as he can now, trying to go all the way around the outside. It's the best attempt he's had so far, barely still within the track there, and Ratz just holds the outside line, turns into the inside, and I think will keep the Audi driver behind, although it has to defend once more as they get towards Bruxelles corner there. But the Ferrari, in the end, able to do a good enough job to keep the number 13 Audi behind. White flag for Kevin Rowlands and Sean Tempest, who's having a scrap with Oliver Perez for this battle in 24th position. Jan Drexler's been able to escape out of all of this, as well as Philip Gross and Noah Reed at swapping positions. McLaren has managed to get through on this last attempt. I think that was done well before we caught it on camera there between the two German drivers. Lateo versus Ratz, still unable to make his way past the very highly top speed orientated Ferrari. But the Audi driver locked into the slipstream and will be able to stick within touching distance, actually maybe getting a good enough run as they head towards the bus stop chicane. The Audi gaining more and more, has to go towards the outside line once again, and have to be extremely brave on the brakes. And brave he is, but it's a bit too much. Just about pulls it back into the track limits before they go through the exit of that chicane there, but it'll be a while, I think, before that battle resumes. One though was right, kicking off at the moment, almost 3 wide now between Tempest, Ferrez and Rowlands towards the bus stop chicane. BMW around the outside now into the chicane. Kevin Rowlands trying to follow him through, and alongside Ferrez on the exit. Drag race now between the Aston Martin and the Ferrari. Meanwhile, Steinbrenner trying to go around the outside of Walsingham in towards Les Combes, and Walsingham's defending that one, I think, by the looks of it, trying to keep the BMW at bay. He has done so. So Walsingham will hold onto that one for the time being. Kirill in the 39 car, I think, has come in for a drive-through penalty further down the order, and that will make his life very difficult to bounce back through the field, especially with only 20 minutes left to go in this race. Steinbrenner still unable to make his way past Walsingham. Same goes for Lateo versus Samuel Ratz in this battle for 15th place, with Brugnara continuously getting that a little bit closer and trying to see if he can get involved in the action. Yellow flag out for Tanvin Zahaka. What has happened there? The Audi driver completely around, and I think has only just got it going again. What has happened to the number 28 car making his way into Stavilo? And as they head in towards 16, on the power he goes. And further up the hill, so he was actually much further up the hill, just comes to a complete stop. Surely that must be for a technical fault. Maybe he's lost force feedback or something in his wheel. But disaster for the British driver, who was having such a strong race, now finds himself down in P9, has lost the position. Hendrik Gamble has got going again, but very unusual and unfortunate incident for the number 28 car that has lost out severely as a result. Hopefully he'll be able to crack on once more. Walsingham versus Steinbrenner still taking place for the battle for P12 between the Mercedes and the BMW. Walsingham able to keep back the German driver for the time being as he looks to try to recover some positions after serving that penalty earlier on in the race. No further changes in terms of penalties. Now Tanvinza Hacker trying to immediately go on the attack, and there's a little bit of contact between himself and Gamble, who's sent wide on the exit there. Tanvinza Hacker does go through, and Walsingham also trying to go around the outside. Steinbrenner trying to go around the outside of Walsingham. Side-by-side action in towards Lacom again. BMW versus Mercedes this time around. Tanvinza Hacker, I think, has given the position back to Gamble up ahead, so good sportsmanship between those two. Walsingham holding on to the position himself for the battle for P12 then. And like I say, Gamble reclaimed that position, so that may be a no further action between those two. We'll have to wait and see what the stewards say about that one. But at least no further penalty has been handed out by the stewards for quite a while now. Lateo still applying the pressure to Samuel Ratz in this battle. 15th place of Brugnara has been gaining over the last few laps as well, as Kevin Rowland signs his way down the inside of Oliver Ferris. Came from very far back. It's on a very wonky line as they head in towards turn 9. Rui Nunez, very opportunistic, and all the way around the outside the Porsche goes and makes his way in towards 26th position then. Fantastic bit of racing between those two. The Portuguese driver immediately capitalising on that compromised line between the squabble that the Aston Martin and the Ferrari had. Matteo still staring at the back of the number 30 Ferrari. Hasn't been able to do anything about the straight line speed advantage of that car. Gamble and Tanvinza Hacker almost swapping positions on the run towards La Source, and Tanvinza Hacker almost went down the inside there. Couldn't quite make it stick. Someone that has, though, is Steinbrenner versus Walsingham, although Walsingham immediately trying to fight back, though, as they head towards La Source then. So it's all kicking off now just around the top 10 positions. Walsingham trying to open up the line on the run up towards Eau Rouge and Radion on this next drag race. How's Tanvinza Hacker getting on versus Henrik Gamble? Gamble in this Porsche, as also Lateo and Rat swapping around. Lateo may have got the move done. It's all kicking off all of a sudden. Tanvinza Hacker trying to go around the outside of Henrik Gamble towards Lacom. They're very late on the brakes once more. Walsingham's around and will try to catch up on. There's contact between these two as well, and somehow those two just about keep on going. It's all kicked off further down the order. Lateo has got past Samuel Ratz. Walsingham's got a heap of damage on board his car, and in a space of a few moments, after fairly even gaps for quite a while, it's all kicked off in the battles within the top 15. Walsingham, as he comes through Rouge and Radion, there's the back of the car, just going to let go of him, and when he gets a major twitch in that car, and it does swap around. Meanwhile, when Samuel Ratz and Lateo were scrapping, you can see Lateo managed to get the run on the exit of La Source then. But in all of that, they have swapped positions once more. We'll see if we can catch that back on the replay. Hopefully we can grab it. Brugnara was across the inside of Radion. Samuel Ratz, with the extra straight line speed of the Ferrari, I think was immediately able to respond to the Audi before they got to turn 7. They're almost 3 wide. It was 3 abreast as they got into that corner. That got extremely busy, and somehow they all end up still maintaining position. But with Lateo ending up losing one back to the Ferrari of Samuel Ratz, have to work for that one all over again. Walsingham continuing to drop down the order, understandably a heap of damage on board that car. Meanwhile, Tanvinza Hacker versus Henrik Gamble taking place once more as they get towards the bus stop chicane, but the Porsche able to maintain position for the time being. Less than 15 minutes of this race to go. George Boothby has now properly checked out from Hutchinson, who's also opened up the gap to Valentin Barrier, who had a very slow lap last time around. Oh, and a big mistake under braking there from the Audi, almost straight into the back of Gamble, and now he's got the K Kramer Racing Esports teammate to that car just behind him, Marco Bischoff, who has been taking chunks of time out of these drivers as of late with all of their squabbling. There's Walsingham letting everybody go through and very bravely soldiering on in that Mercedes, obviously deciding that the pit stop maybe not worth the damage repair in the end, so he's going to have a very troublesome time to the end of this race. Kevin Rowlands versus Oliver Ferris once more towards the bus stop chicane, but the Aston can't get down the inside on this occasion, so the Ferrari will still maintain position. Similar story with Tanvinza Hacker versus Gamble. because the Audi having to work back towards reclaim that position. It's getting busy with Lateo versus Rats once more. The Ferrari holding that inside line. Walsingham dropping a position to Dom Healy further down the order, just slowing down. Oh, looks left, looks right, tries to go for a switch back towards the inside line. The room was just not there for the Frenchman to make that one 6. I had to go back towards the racing line, but that's always a scary sight when you're so close to the braking zone, because it is decisions like that and very last-minute moves that can end in disaster. And we saw that sort of instance with Sean Tempest propelling Samuel Ratson-Penninan forward in that instant towards the bus stop chicane. So it can very much go wrong, but thankfully nothing further caused as a result of that. What about Tichenor, who's going all the way around the outside of Walsingham? We'll go on board with the Mercedes. You see that bonnet completely crooked out the front. Kevin Rowlands versus Oliver Perez has kicked off once more. This has been a brewing fight between these two, between the 38 and the 25 car, now scrapping for 26th position. How did that one fare? White flag out for Komazayuk in the last few moments. I don't think anything too severe though. Aston Martin maybe just got a much better run as they went through turn 9, and then I think it's going to be a dive under braking there onto the Ferrari that did leave the door open, and Kevin Rowlands just says thank you very much and makes his way up into that position after such an intense scrap that those drivers have had. Meanwhile, Tanvin Zahakat still applying the pressure to Henrik Gamble, with Bischoff lurking in the background. Matthias Lateo again only a 1/10 of a second behind Samuel Ratz, but I think then losing it all under braking. Walsingham still dropping positions. I don't know if staying out with that car, as wounded as it is, was the right call in the end for the British driver, is almost sandwiched towards the outside line. The number 28 car almost left with nowhere to go, but firm defense from the German driver, and now it's a bit of a sandwich of K. Kramer Racing Esports Porsches around this Audi, and Tanvin Zahakat will be feeling the pressure. Marco Bischoff in your rearview mirrors, two-time Pro Series champion, back-to-back champion of that. And that is definitely one of the cars that you do not want lurking in your rear view mirror. But Tanvin Zahakat, we know he's had the pace, but hasn't quite been able to execute it. And Gamble's done a great job of holding up the Audi for his teammate, trying to capitalise as Bischoff. You can see how much extra speed he was able to carry through Paul. And of course, that is part of the circuit that is going to be in favour of the Porsche, almost glued to the rear diffuser as they head through turn 14 now. And the Audi still holding on, but with Henrik Gamble just in front. Let's see how they fare on this next drag race up the hill towards the bus stop chicane. You can see the Audi does lose out a surprising amount of time relative to Gamble, who we go on board the diffuser of now. Just over 10 minutes of this race left. It's been a very busy one, start to finish. Bischoff and Tanvin Zahakat gaining and heading towards the braking zone. Do we see a dive from either of them? And the answer is no. So still exercising patience, as now Walsingham, I think, just losing another position to Sean Tempest. We're already down to 24th place for the Visual Esports Mercedes. Very unfortunate stuff there. Show of the nose from Marco Bischoff, and a little bit deep under brakes there from the number 28 car of Tanvin Zahakat. Now, Henrik Gamble able to escape a little bit as a result, and the straight line speed of the Audi not as good as he would have been wanting for Felix, but he has got a pretty good run, it must be said, as they went through Eau Rouge and Radion. He's got to be careful of Bischoff behind, who is also closing. So get very busy on the run up towards Lake On there. Bischoff down the inside, using the slipstream with his teammate. Tanvin Zahakat trying to go all the way around the outside once again. It's kicked off between Lateo and Rats further down, and door-to-door contact between Tanvin Zahakat and Henrik Gamble now through in towards turn 9. They maintain position. Bischoff trying to go for a move in that as well, but I don't think, unless he goes all the way around the outside of the Audi, he's trying to make it stick, and he can't make that one happen. What on earth kicked off further down the order between Rats and Lateo then, because they have plummeted down the order, losing think 2 positions in the process, and there it was. Contact. Oh, that was awkward as well with the outside pit wall, rather an indestructible pit wall of that. That actually, I think, self-righted those cars ever so slightly, but as a result, Komazayuk and Brugnara able to make their way through, and Matis Lateo dropping back, and I'm sure there'll be some further words. It's possibly not too surprising. Those two have been absolutely nose to tail for so long in this race. It was bound to happen at some point. I'm sure the stewards will be having a look at that in due course. Still no more penalties handed out in this race. Rats pushing the Aston Martin now that he finds in front of him of Komazayuk, but unable to find a way past. Surely, though, the straight line speed advantage of that Ferrari is going to help open up an opportunity in towards the bus stop chicane. Opportunities running out, and diving down the inside for one of them is Tanvin Zahaka, and Gamble trying to fight back on the exit. It's going to be a 3-wide drag race out of the final corner then. Gamble still keeping the position. Marco Bischoff now trying to go all the way around the outside as they get towards La Source. Tanvin Zahaka making a little bit of contact with Gamble there, and Bischoff's going to take a pair of them. So Marco Bischoff, using all the experience in that cockpit to take 2 for the price of 1, goes into P8 there, and I'm sure Tanvin Zahaka and Gamble have a few words to say to one another, but Bischoff wasting no time, letting it all play out in front of him and taking a position. Samuel Ratch did open up an opportunity on to Komazayuk with Matis Lateo as that battle almost immediately resumes. It's almost like they never left. And towards La Source they go. Ferrari defending the inside line now. In actual fact, that goes to an attack from Samuel Ratz there. Komazayuk is going to lose maybe 2 as well on the exit of turn 1. And Lateo versus Ratz is going to be taking place once more, almost being pushed along towards Eau Rouge now. Surely we'll have to back out of the throttle there. It's gone wrong between these two not too long ago, and it's a very tricky part of the circuit to follow through. Tanvin Zahaka, excuse me, Lateo in the Audi, absolutely glued to Rats once more and trying to now go around the outside in towards Lacon, but again, unable to make it stick. Maybe goes for a switchback. It's going to have to be a series of switchbacks towards the run into turn 9. But the Ferrari holds on strong, and the Aston Martin of Komazayuk still locked into battle as well. Witte versus Drexler. Drexler having to cut the exit of turn 8 there, and in the end Benny Witte coming out on top in all of that. Sasha Vassner has brought out a yellow flag. What was that for? Oh dear, I think that is for an incident with the wall. We didn't quite see the beginning of it, but it did look like he emerged rather out of the wall on the exit of Radion there. Noah Reeder able to carry the momentum and make his way past as well. Philip Gross is very much involved in the fight for that position now as well. For 29th place, Tanvin Zahaka versus Gamble once again. Now trying to go around the outside towards the bus stop chicane. Takes a little bit of the sausage curve. I'm not sure if that would have helped his exit particularly. But Marco Bischoff immediately checking out from these two and running off towards trying to close down Gerardis, but it's Tanvin Zahaka now making a much more successful dive. Little bit of contact though in the middle of the corner between Gamble and the Audi in front of him. Now side by side once more towards Eau Rouge, and he may have swapped positions with him before. I'm not sure if Tanvin Zahaka is going to give it this time. Number 12, oh dear, and that's a big instant towards Eau Rouge and Radion, and coming across is the BMW of Robin Schaefer, and big instant there in towards Eau Rouge. Car still stranded across the circuit. Henry Gamble has gone northbound. Robin Schaefer, I think, almost got further collective. Whitehead cutting across the inside of Eau Rouge there, and we'll have to watch that again because that emerged almost out of nowhere as they were running towards Eau Rouge. Tanvin Zahaka was in front and it was upset on the entry, sweeps across the inside line. Schaefer then follows through on the incident, has nowhere to go, and then Whitehead on his way up in towards this part of the circuit. Here goes wide, finding several cars stranded across, and I think gains 3 positions there in a very short space of time. My goodness, that kicked off very quickly. Gamble I think, rather valiantly retired to the pits very quickly. Vassner has seemingly had another incident again, has he? And he has on the exit of Blanchimont. So the Porsche driver, in the space of just a couple of laps, has had a big issue there and has gone into the wall again, maybe as a result of the damage on board that car. And into the pits that he goes. Rui Nunez brought out the white flag for a moment, but I can't see anything too severe there. Look at the damage on board the front of Schaefer's car. A big shame there. We've had a lot of extremely hard but fair racing today, and unfortunately, on occasion, it has ended up resulting... Oh, it's white flag for George Boothby. What happened there? For our race lead, all goes very wide over the exit of Radion and in almost into the wall. I'm sure that would have been a little bit of a scary moment for the race leader, but seemingly gathers it all up and is able to carry on. Only 3 minutes of this race left to go. Lateo and Rats continuing their battle, and surely will be coming across Robin Schaefer in due course alongside Brugnara, the Italian driver in the Ferrari, not too far up ahead of these two. Lateo, though, again looking towards the outside line. Can't make anything stick there. Tries to go for the switchback on the exit towards turn 1. Has got the better drive out of the corner, but we know how good the Ferrari is in a straight line, but it's a short stretch towards turn 1. Big swing towards the outside there from the Audi. Also white flag further down the order from Sean Tempest. I think he had a wide moment through Blanchimont, but we'll go back on board with Lateo. That's getting very close to the concrete on the right-hand side there, and I don't like how this is looking between these two as they head through Eau Rouge and Radion. Somehow, how they managed to get through there safely, just about. Rats has to take a lot of evasive action, and now in actual fact that may have compromised Lateo somewhat, because here comes Komisaruk. Robin Schaefer has now dropped the position to Brugnara, and Komisaruk trying to dive from very far away. Oh, and that got close, and there's Robin Schaefer losing time. Handover fist caught in a very awkward place. The Audi's been sent towards the outside there into the gravel. Lateo goes, Komisaruk making it 3 wide almost across the front of Schaefer. Then Dom Healy's now joining this one just for fun, and into Bruxelles. Lateo losing 2 seconds now to Rats. Komisaruk and the other Aston Martin of Healy right on the gearbox of the Audi driver. Schaefer still dropping away from these two, and maybe shortly was going to lose some more positions in all of this, because he is running extremely slowly. Final lap of the race is the announcement from the engineer, and final lap it is indeed for George Boothby, who has had a very clean race. And there goes Tichenot around the outside of Schaefer. Walsingham suffering similar fate as well, running extremely slowly in that wounded Mercedes. Couple of cars really struggling in the tail end of this race. Komisaruk, Dom Healy, those gaps have opened up. One that hasn't, though, is Rui Nunez versus Sean Tempest. It's been dropping down the order over the last few laps. 2-minute 21.9 for the BMW last time around. So maybe amongst the issues that he has had, he's had some damage or contact with the wall at some point. It is tricky to tell, as Robin Schaefer, I think, may end up losing a position to Penningen very shortly. Wide goes Komisaruk, and Dom Healy maybe an opportunity in towards the bus stop chicane. Not quite in all of that. George Boothby making his way towards turn 13 now. Half a lap to go for the number 4 car, who has been in control of this race since the very beginning and has been largely unflappable other than that one small mistake. Sean Tempest, has he run out of fuel? Because he's plummeting down the order. That's another car that's been enabled to go past. Komisaruk has also suddenly made his way past Matis Lateo. It's all still kicking off on the battles for P14. White flag out for Brugnara as these two continue to scrap through Eau Rouge and Radion, and it's a yellow flag. Oh, there's Brugnara. That's the reason why. So he's got off completely, pointing entirely the wrong direction. Drag race for each of these drivers up towards the end of Les Combes there. It's going to get very busy between these drivers. I will take a brief look away, though, because George Boothby has dominated this race today and wins here at Spa Francorchamps. But further down, with the likes of Lateo, Komisaruk, Dom Healy scrapping for P13. It's been the story of this race, where we have just had battles more or less non-stop up through the field. And Mateo maintaining position. Brugnara still dropping down the order now, well outside the top 20. All of these drivers scrapping. Hutchinson and Barrett completing the podium. And in the end, having a pretty lonesome race. Those gaps really opened up to around 7 seconds apiece by the time this race finished. Komazayuk, Dom Healy, those gaps have opened as well. Ferres losing some positions as well. What has happened there? I'm not sure if we've got multiple drivers struggling for fuel at the tail end of this race, and then several drivers slowing down. We've got complications with Noah Eder and Philip Gross as well in the closing stages. Gross has dropped behind Noah Eder. Schaefer losing out to Rui Nunez. Now it's chaos on the final lap of this race, and Schaefer, you can see how hard he is struggling to keep that car going. Kevin Rowlands is going to come across him in a moment. Here's a scrap that's been taking place on the run up towards bus stop chicane though. Healy, Komazayuk and Mateo. It's been a busy old time for each of these. Will we see any heroics in towards the final corner? I don't think we're going to be able to. Dom Healy trying it, but is going to be too far back in the end. Meanwhile, Brugnara losing 3 positions very swiftly. Jan Drexler's trying to make a final move around the outside of Nico Pendon. I think he's made it stick. Beautiful stuff from number 23 car to get that one done on the last lap of the race. So he'll finish in P17 ahead of Pendon and Benny Vitter, rounding out that trio of BMWs. And meanwhile, as Brugnara's around again, oh, that's going to get very awkward with Sean Tempers, Noah Reid and Philip Gross arriving on the scene as well. There's the Porsche and the McLaren having to take evasive action at the end. Philip Gamay across that as well, and Philip Gross can't make anything happen on the Porsche in front of him as they get towards the bus stop chicane. And as the final few drivers make their way towards the line, that will be it then for 90 minutes here at Spa Francorchamps. What an absolutely chaotic and dramatic race that we've had in the Pro Series once again. It is just a story time after time here at LFM. The Case King Pro Series, it always puts on a show. It always puts on drama. And it is usually relentless from start to finish. Unusually not quite so much at the tippy top of the grid. It was all in the mid-pack at the tail end of the field. But most of our drivers in the top 10, by the end of it, had a fairly lonesome race in all of that. Some final penalties came through at the end in all of that chaos. A 5-second penalty for the number 20 car. And that was Henrik Gamble, who retired to the pits anyway. So that won't be having too much of an effect on him at the end. And I think that was all of the penalties that were served in all of that. Hopefully, if we are lucky, we have had George Boothby in for an interview previously, and with his second race win of the season, that would certainly be good to have him in the... Excuse me, actually, I think first race win of the season, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a pretty eventful one he's had. I do actually just need to check that for a moment, because we have certainly had a lot of back and forth where he has been in contention for race victory time after time. Certainly one of the winningest drivers that we have had here in the Pro Series, but it hasn't always quite gone his way from race to race. And just looking back through, no, this is his first victory of the season, so it's taken a while. And certainly if he is looking to try to make a late charge in the championship, that is exactly what this man needs to do if he wants to try to close in those points. Because, crucially, Whitehead finishing all the way down in P11, managed to recover some positions near the end. We will also see after the race results have come through, after some of those penalties will have been dished out on the last lap. So the final finishing order for all of that then here at Spa Francorchamps. George Boothby takes a dominant victory ahead of Hutchinson and Barrier with Gary Huang. Great race from him. Karekas, a fairly lonesome 5th place, but good effort from him in the Porsche. Fock, Gerardis, Bischoff, Steinbrenner, Tanvin Zahaka rounding out the top 10. And then we had Rats, Lateo, Komazayuk, Healy, Tichanos down to 16th place, with Drexler, Pendon, Vitter, Nunez towards the tail end of the top 20. Rowlands, Ferrers, Eder, Gross, Gamay, Brugnara, Tempest, Walsingham, finishing in 28th position with Kopsov and Yan Yog, I think, rounding out top 30. And then Makoski, Vassner, Gamble, Kirill, Antonov, Kirill being the last of your drivers to score points in this race, with DNFs being handed out to a few of those drivers at the very end of the session, unfortunately. So not too much, I think, of a shuffle in the end for drivers at the end of that session, because I don't think there was too much left in the way of penalties to be dished out amongst them. And my goodness, what an eventful race that we have had once more in the Pro Series. It happens time after time, and week after week we get non-stop action that keeps the drivers on their tippy-top performance and trying to push as hard as they can, sometimes pushing a little bit too hard, unfortunately, and resulting in some contacts, and certainly giving me the runaround to try to keep up with all the action. But would we have it any other way? Of course we wouldn't. But in terms of the championship, this is a sort of pivotal round that I was hinting could end up taking place, because with a result like that, of course, likely to feature as a drop score for Luke Whitehead. But bearing in mind, in the total summation of points this season, George Boothby missed out the very first round. So he had a 0 score to his name already, and was within something around 1,000 odd points. Now, I don't think that this will completely throw it back the other way for George Boothby to be in the lead of this championship, but it certainly does even up the odds between those two drivers. And Korekas hanging around in there as well. Good result as well for Hutchinson as he tries to keep his championship hopes alive as well in that 4th place position. So very dramatic race that we have had here tonight. It doesn't look like, unfortunately, we're going to have too much in the way of interviews this evening, which is a bit of a shame for that. But heading into next week's round, our drivers for round 10 of the championship will be going to Indianapolis, and that's going to be a very interesting one as well. I think a circuit that tends to suit the Ferraris very nicely, so we could see Hutchinson very much in the mix again. Similar story perhaps for the Porsches, an absolute weapon in the middle sector, but one of the main overtaking opportunities down that, or through the banking, or through the very tail end of the banking. We don't get too much of it, unfortunately, here on ACC. And then that run towards turn 1, and then also the run towards, I think, around turn 7 or 8, when we get to that sort of windy section before we go out onto the outer loop. Those are the two main overtaking opportunities, and there aren't many about in general. So straight line speed, acceleration, so the Hondas and Ferraris will likely be very strong again. So we could see a bit of a tough time for the likes of Whitehead, Korekas, Bischoff, those top drivers in the Porsches, whereas those like Hutchinson, Valentine Barrier, Jardier should be back for next week's round as well. Boothby, of course, will likely be firmly in the mix to be in with a chance of victory there, and could start to make things very tight into the final rounds of this championship. But it looks like that will be it for this evening's action of racing here on LFM, and another fantastic race we have had. If you have enjoyed what you have been watching, then do consider subscribing to the channel. All support has been incredible over the last few months, and we're continuing to grow every single day, as well as this incredible community. Well over 80,000 users now on the LFM platform. And if you fancy getting involved in some of this driving yourself, then head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com and get yourself signed up and get yourself a license, and you can start dueling it out with other drivers, and you work your way through the ranks, can compete in stellar championships like this with some fantastic prizes up for grabs. There's also, of course, the daily racing, and if ACC isn't quite your thing, R Factor 2 is now on LFM as well, with single-seater action, sports cars, GT, touring cars, you name it. So there's something a little bit for everybody. And if you just want to be a part of this amazing growing community and share all things good sim racing and motorsport, then do also consider joining the Discord server as well. Great to have as many of you joining that as possible, and growing this group more as we go on. So thank you everybody so much for joining us this evening. We will be back same time, same place as we head to Indianapolis for the 10th round of the Case King Pro Series, where things are starting to get very busy and very interesting at the tail end of this championship. I look forward to seeing as many of you there next week as possible. But for tonight then, it's goodbye.